Committee. Need a confirmation of the quorum, which I believe, Mr. Secretary, we have.
We do, yeah.
A confirmation of the meeting agenda, if anybody would like to add or subtract or edit or have comments on the meeting agenda. I will ask the committee, if it's all right with them, that if we move back and forth between these agenda items, because it's going to be pretty hard to keep this meeting, to get what we want done by just sticking to one right after the other. And if that's not a problem, you did make it. Excellent.
I was fearing you flew into JFK and had to deal with the papal entourage.
It wasn't going to be fun,
Yeah.
but it worked. Sorry for the...
Our first order of business is agenda item number 4. We have a backlog of meeting minutes because we had 2 or 3 special meetings in order to kind of expedite the process. It's up to the committee, but my feeling would be we take them one at a time
Yeah.
because they are... That said, I'd entertain a motion for waiving the reading but accepting the building committee minutes from July 9th.
Make that motion?
Motion made.
I second that.
Seconded. Any comments, discussions, additions, corrections to the meeting minutes of July 9th? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Against? Abstain? We'll now consider the meeting minutes for July 30th. I'd entertain a motion to waive reading and accept and for acceptance.
Make that motion?
I'll second
Made,
it.
seconded. Any comments or issues, changes, additions, edits to the meeting minutes of July 30th? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstain? We'll now consider the meeting minutes of August 20th, 2015. I'd entertain a motion to waive reading and accept.
Yeah, camera. Make that motion?
I'll second
Motion
it.
made and seconded. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Are there any changes, additions, edits, anything to the minutes of August 20th?
Mr. Chairman, I was present at that meeting. I'd like the minutes to show that I was present.
All right. Any other issues? All those are in favor of the motion
As amended.
as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
That leaves us with the minutes of, the 9th of October, of September?
Third.
Third. How's this one? Okay, 3rd of September. I'd entertain a motion to waive reading and accept
Make that
those
motion?
minutes. Are there any changes or additions or edits to those minutes of September 3rd, 2015? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstain? Thank you.
There's extra copies over there.
You want to come? You don't want mine just marked up? At the beginning of the last meeting, I made some comments that brought the committee and those at home who may be viewing this meeting an update. And so I'd like to do the same thing. We've had an awful lot on our agenda the last meeting 3 weeks ago, and a lot has happened in the interim. And so I think in order to kind of keep us on track, I'd like to kind of reset where we were. At the last meeting, the committee received presentations regarding alternate redesign projects in an effort to find a Penfield repair solution that would come in less than the funded amount and would maximize FEMA reimbursement. At the last meeting, we left off as follows. The committee should focus on one project. At the conclusion of our last meeting, this project was the redesign that assumed elimination of the locker wing. We also said that the committee should assume that any new or revised budgets reflect increased contingency, to your point, and that we should be aware of the current bidding climate. Or I should say probably more aware of the current bidding climate. We asked the town bond council for the town bond council's opinion regarding eliminating all or a portion of the lockers. And do we have to go back for approval even though the proposed redesign project could be less than the approved amount of $6 million? So we requested, and I will hear during the meeting, we received an opinion from bond counsel regarding whether or not we had to go back for reapproval and whether or not the elimination of the lockers was a material change. We asked Shawmut to concentrate on the final estimated cost for the redesign project that eliminated the locker wing. We made reference to the need to hold the original bid project in abeyance. That's the project that went out to bid, and to hold it in abeyance while we considered other alternatives. And while holding it in abeyance, to continue to work out any details regarding the final project cost. And that also included a meeting, which I believe took place between a Shawmut representative and Twig Holland to look at any owner's costs that may not have been picked up. Then we requested a meeting to be organized to confirm the status of the FEMA project worksheet and FEMA commitments regarding the Penfield project, FEMA criteria regarding the project scope and reimbursement. That meeting did take place in the form of a conference call this week. We suggested that Shawmut reconfirm various owners' costs. I just went through that, that were brought up during the committee, the recent bid process. The committee was asked to confer with the Director of Parks and Recreation regarding reduction or elimination of the lockers and suggested alternate projects in general. So I just want to let the committee know that the chair participated in a telephone conference call yesterday morning that included the town's FEMA consultant, Bob Mayer, Joe Michelangelo, and later in the call, First Selectman Tetro. So I just, even though I hate to drag everybody through it, I just wanted to make sure that we start this afternoon stepping off from a good place, if that's possible with this project.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
One thing that I would like to add, as reflected in the minutes, and if you recall from the last meeting, there were several members of this committee who asked to see in writing from FEMA, as well as the FEMA consultants, what that breakout is.
Okay. Noted, and I think we'll bring that up when we hear from the First Selectman and Mr. Mayor if he's here. But in order to get things started and to kind of set the stage for these basically two alternate projects that we're dealing with, it'd be appropriate at this time, I think, and it's also our next agenda item, to hear from the First Selectman, who was in on this meeting, and Bob Mayer also in between, behind, together with.
First of all, thank you. Wanted to take a moment as we get into this conversation. Chairman Bradley is very good to set the stage, and I wanted to add a few comments to that. One, simply put, as has been done before, but I think needs to be done again, I want to thank this committee. It looks like we're nearing the end of what's been an incredible journey, and I want to thank you for your time. I don't think most building committees have put in the number of hours per month or had to wade through some of the paperwork and explanations. You've dealt with the structure, evaluating 11 different options over the last couple years. You've also had to deal with a wide range of FEMA comments and considerations in going through that. And I don't think there's been a more complex building project in our time, in our town, that I can remember. So I want to thank you again for going through that. To navigate this journey took a lot of confidence, determination, perseverance, tenacity, some good guidance, and a bit of luck. And I want to congratulate you on the time and effort you put in to get all of that. You know, as we've gone through this, at any point in time, or several break points, we could have given up, and you didn't do that. We could have settled for less. When I talk about settling for less, one of the key points on that is both in the building structure, as you evaluate different options, but importantly, as we evaluated FEMA, and quite literally as you witnessed our fight with FEMA at times, where we could have, their initial comments, their initial estimates to us, much like the flood insurance companies did to our homeowners in the beach area, they wanted to get us less than we deserved. They wanted to give us less than we were rightfully deserving of. and they wanted to cost the taxpayers in this town more money. Because we stayed with that, got some help from our federal delegation, actually a couple different times, and got our federal delegation to both sit on FEMA, get FEMA to stand by their guidelines, and at one point bring in somebody, a consultant of their own, to make sure that they were following their own guidelines. All right, and that got us another $4 million potentially in terms of the payback. So we're in a much different position today, both having passed the 50% rule and having the project worksheet, or PW, issued. That puts us in a much stronger position to evaluate where we are and what we need to do going forward. As you look at different options, you've got a full range. You can build something smaller. You can actually demolish it and knock it down and build it all new. You also have the option of going back, and I'm going to take a risky guess here, but I think it was 7A, that basically gives us full functionality in replacing the structure, but also gives us a chance to maximize our FEMA reimbursement and minimize the cost to the town. There were two guidelines that we've talked about following from day one. One is simply do what's best for the town in the long run. Don't take any shortcuts. We're here, in my opinion, because when we look back to the original rebuild, we didn't use pilings. If we'd used pilings as a foundation, we wouldn't be standing, or I wouldn't be standing here, you wouldn't be sitting there today, and us be talking about this. All right. You're doing, as I've watched this committee work, you've evaluated decisions, and you've made the right decision for the long run for the town in each case. And I want to thank you for doing that. As I look at your options, and as this committee has asked for some guidance from the first selectman, I would ask you to strongly consider 7A. I think that provides the best option for the town going forward. It's something we've got the most background on, the most bid work on, the most detail on. We've got the most firm costs, and we have a chance for getting the maximum FEMA reimbursement out of that. So I'd ask you to strongly consider that. And if you were to ask me for my recommendation, is that we go with 7A. I think that fits best for what the town needs, especially when you balance this against the other options in the beach areas. Everything from almost nothing at Southport Beach to a moderate facility at Jennings to a more comprehensive facility here, and provides our citizens a full range of options, which I think is important for our town. So with that as an intro, I want to thank you for giving me a chance to speak here, and good luck as you go through the rest of this meeting.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? You know, it would be a great segue into asking Mr. Mayor to come up and kind of describe to us where we think we are with FEMA, because we are going to be considering options here, including 7A, and obviously the background would be helpful. If you don't mind.
No, except that you and I have spent so much time together recently that I think you know this as well as I do, so you could probably give the presentation yourself.
Well, just briefly, where you're coming from, and also to the point, frankly, the reason I'd like to hear from you is the point that was made by my colleague here about where we are officially, i.e. documentation or whatever, with FEMA. I think maybe that's the key point from your perspective.
Okay, we have, as I mentioned at the last meeting before you, we received notice from the feds that we had satisfied the 50% rule. Monday of this week, we received the project work paper, which we've been waiting for. The total amount in the project work paper is about $6,590,000, which is their estimate of what it would take to rebuild the facility. Rebuilding the facility as in same function, capacity, and design. Function and capacity being the two strongest of those two criteria. Design, we think we can negotiate. Nothing is certain, but we think we can negotiate. Which I think I also said at the last meeting. The, using 7A as an example, 7A has the same function, has the same capacity, has minor design differences from the original structure that was there. So we have the PW with FEMA, we have a design for a structure that has the same capacity, function, a little difference in design. The process going forward would, if the committee made a decision to go forward with that, if the town made a decision to go forward with that effort, the process, the next steps would be, what we're doing right now is analyzing the PW. The PW talks about what they pay for. It's broken down into multiple categories. What they think needs to be done, et cetera, with pricing. What we would do is get together and line up the scope. So, okay, we agree that this is what needs to be done. Once that scope is lined up, then as long as we stay within that scope, all the costs necessary to accomplish that effort would be eligible for the 75% reimbursement rate minus the 1.75 insurance reimbursement minus the approximately $750,000 we've gotten for community development block grants. So for example, if this facility costs $7 million, you would reduce that $7 million by the $2.5 million for the insurance and the block grants, which gives you $4.5 million. 25% of that, or $1,125,000, be the town share, and 25%, and 75%, or $3,375,000, would be the FEMA share. The other advantage, and one of the reasons that we fought really hard to get from that $1.9 million PW that was issued not issued, it was never issued, but FEMA's preliminary PW number of several months ago, to get to the 50% rule eligibility, is not only is the number $4.6 million greater, but any cost overruns, as long as you stay aligned with the scope, the agreed upon defined scope, would be covered at that and considered eligible costs. So backing up a little bit, we meet with them, our architects, our engineers, our consultants, get together, align the scope, agree on the project, and then rebid it, I guess, because I think there needs to be some rebidding, or I'm not really clear on all of that, and move forward. Now, one of the rules is since this is not exactly the same design, we'd have to show that it is cost beneficial to do this versus other methodologies. So there'd be some discussions about what's the cost benefit is and why it's better than other alternatives.
What do you mean by better? Better for who?
Lower cost.
I think it comes into play, Ellery, when you look at if we get into a situation where we're comparing our project, which is a repair of the West Wing, versus their assumption, which would be a rebuilding of the West Wing. They would want to know that the repair is a lower cost option rather than tearing down and building new. Up to you. I'm going to ask the committee if they have any questions, but the first one was the one I don't want to steal Ann's thunder. But as far as official word from FEMA, and and going, and the committee, and obviously the bodies that will ask for approval, is this official from them, or how do they make this official? By producing the project worksheet, or?
The initial was the email that we got a month or so ago, and then the project worksheet, yes.
So the project worksheet comes from them, doesn't have any commitments on it, it just said this is where?
Well, no, we've qualified 50% rule. Basically, we're talking about a government entity. We're talking about legislation, rules, laws, governance, guidance, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we qualify,
Right.
and we have a number. And now it's time to sit down with them and align scope,
The other
one
thing-
way or another.
The other thing is, I remember in our 3 tries at Board of Finance, that there was a number that was being used then as a range. And is this, if this turns out to be a $7 million project, does the net cost of the town still fit within that range that we were discussing at that time?
Yeah, the low number in that range was 953,000 or 43,000, I don't remember exactly. High range was $1,500,000. If we came in at $5 million, this would be $1,125,000. So the answer is yes.
Questions from the committee? I'll start right in the end.
Okay,
Yeah.
I said, Bob, the 6.59 million, you mentioned the project worksheet, is that already, what does that represent? You said FEMA's estimate to rebuild.
Correct. That's a starting point.
That was a starting point, so once scope gets aligned and all that worksheet gets finalized, which I do understand the process, but the 659 is not where the 75% can come in off of that, right?
The
What's
75%
eligible-
comes in off of the eligible, the actual expenditures.
Right.
The actual eligible expenditures.
So are they saying in the worksheet that 6.59 is eligible in the worksheet? Or
They're
are they-
saying that's what they think it should cost us, but then you sit down, you get together, then you go out to bid, get the actual numbers. Since we qualify for 2% rule, the actual numbers prevail. So the actual numbers rule over the 659.
So the 659 is their estimate without looking at a set of plans, just to
Right.
rebuild the facility?
Yeah, they use, you're in construction a little bit, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
They use ours as means testing,
Okay.
or evaluation process.
So it's not a hard number from them that it cannot exceed?
Correct.
Once the design is done and we align, it's aligned what scope is truly eligible, that number could be $8 million.
Yeah, you don't want to get too far on the line, but yes.
Okay, thank you. Ian?
Bob, if we were to go with option 7A, what percentage of that cost, of that 6.7 or 7 million, would be considered eligible under the information that you just presented to us versus mitigation?
There is no mitigation. I tried to explain this before, so obviously haven't gone through, so I'm going to try it a little harder.
Well, let me help you a little bit.
There
Maybe
is
you
no
can I'll help you so
mitigation
you
from
can
the
shorten it.
perspective.
One second,
from-
I'll help you so you can shorten it. Mitigation, as you defined in your presentations to us, was the
Let me-
lifting of the
Ian,
building.
let me explain. With the 50% rule, you are approved for all codes and standards. So there's no requirement for mitigation. Because elevation, all that stuff is included. So nothing comes under the category of mitigation.
Okay, so that's new information, because that's not what we had been told before. Okay.
That's what you've been told before. Maybe I just didn't explain it correctly.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And then isn't it true, just for clarification, that that for these type of projects, the exact terminology from FEMA is up to 75% reimbursement cost?
I can't answer that. I'd have to go back and look. I think I have read a lot of literature that says 75%. There may be some literature also that says up to, depending upon the project. I have no idea. I've read a lot of the literature, a lot of the regs that says 75%.
Okay. With all due respect, this committee has been asking for about a month now and I believe, Mr. Bolito's not with us tonight, but I believe Mr. Bolito's exact words were that we don't want to go on hearsay, right? Because we have to make decisions as Mr. Tetro has dutifully mentioned, that reflect the entire position, the town of the benefit for the entire town. So we don't want to make haphazard decisions or recommendations. Yet we've been asking for a month to see in writing, copies of what the town has received from FEMA, so that we can be assured that we're not going on hearsay, so that we can question ourselves, amongst ourselves, as well as outward to other professionals such as yourself, what certain definitions might be in the language that FEMA has presented. And here we sit once again a month later, and we still don't have copies of anything in writing from FEMA. We have a nice presentation, and I thank you for that, and I respect you for that. But this committee has to make some hard decisions, as Mr. Tetro pointed out, and I don't think that we can make hard decisions on statements of hearsay versus fact. And I happen to know that FEMA does issue things in writing. I have some myself, and I'm just wondering why we haven't received it yet.
As soon as I leave this podium, I'll go upstairs and try to look for that email I sent. Bring it down.
Thank you.
Okay, one thing that might be, now that we don't often have both the first selectman and the fiscal officer in the same room at the same time, this committee in the very beginning avoided the situation you're talking about by saying that they were going to rely on the funding agencies, whether it be the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, or RTM, the approval agencies, to confirm the funding, and that the town finance department or office would be responsible for the very things you're talking about. I don't know how deeply this committee wants to go into the verification of this. If we're told by one of the, between your office and the Board of Finance, which is exactly what happened last time, that the funding's in place, that they're going to bond the project, and that they're going to take whatever they can get after your explanation of what they can get. Isn't that your department, or should we be in it?
I didn't quite understand the question, but
That's okay.
it's but a little bit about the funding. It might be a little enlightening because it has not been covered, and you guys did stay out of that in the beginning of the question. The town has passed 2 bond resolutions that relate to Penfield. Shortly after the storm, the Board of Finance took a survey of all the damage, put together some estimates of what it would cost, and knowing that the estimates were initial estimates and subject to significant change, a bond resolution was passed for $5,155,000. That bond resolution included all the capital projects that the town had identified at that time with an estimate of the amount of money that needed to be spent for each. That bond resolution also was written a little differently than most of our bond resolutions in that it allowed, if Project A went under or over, monies that was fungible to be transferred among all of the projects. Of all the projects listed in that bond resolution, all of them either aren't going to be done or have been completed, with one exception, Penfield. Penfield was in there initially for $1 million. I don't know the exact number, I didn't get time to look it up today, but I think there's about $2 million left, maybe a little more, in that bond resolution. So that's piece of information number 1. Piece of information number 2, in February, the town bodies authorized $6,028,000 for Penfield specifically. That $6,028,000 bond resolution did not supersede or delete or eliminate or in any way reference the earlier bond resolution. So from a purely fiscal, financial perspective, the town has authorized and has available for spending for Penfield, about $8 million. Now, I don't think that means, what that means is, it doesn't technically require governing body authorization to spend more than $6,028,000. However, I think we would certainly have dialogue and provide the information to the governing bodies so they could deal with that information as they determine.
Thank you. We did ask for, and we did receive a clarification from bond counsel about the elimination of all or partial of the lockers, which are not anticipated, that is not anticipated by 7A.
Correct, yeah.
And that opinion was that the elimination of partial or all lockers was a material change and would impact the bond resolution.
What, yes, bond counsel's decision is that if there's material change, and that would definitely be material change, that the revised project would have to go back through the town bodies and be refunded.
Right.
Correct statement.
Question from
It's not a question for Bob, but I'm thoroughly confused. I have FEMA, and unless I misunderstood what you said, they did not see a plan, a design plan. Excuse me. When they gave the number to us, they did not have design plans?
Well, they've definitely seen our design plans. They've scrutinized them closely, yes.
I'm sorry that I misunderstood you, because I thought you said they had not had that. So FEMA has seen our design plans and said this is what they think it should cost. Our council, our council has told us they think it should cost this, and the marketplace has said a different number. So we have three different things on the one situation. It's not a question for Bob, but I don't know how we ever reconcile that, and I don't think we should take Bob's time, but at some time in the meeting, how do you reconcile these?
Well,
To make an intelligent
I
decision.
mean, I can answer that question. Basically, we don't really have a solid bid yet. We went out to bid. One of the major bidders was not properly qualified, so that bid doesn't really count. So we really don't have a solid bid. But we know approximately, based upon that bidding process, combined with the other work that the architects and the construction company has done, and the work that you guys have done. So that's one number. Second number is the RS means testing number that came up. You can look at that evaluation similar to what you guys did before you went out to bid. Your group said, we think it's going to cost this much. Your group had the design, had the architectural work, just infinite knowledge about all of it, and you thought it was going to be in February, you thought it was going to be $6 million. You went out to bid, it came back $6,900,000, or some number. Okay? So what you have here is now you have a FEMA number. You could kind of equate that FEMA number, that's 6590, to your original 6. Okay, so they're like $600,000 more than you guys were. But it's not a hard number. Basically, when we align the scope, when we get the final bids, then that number becomes adjusted, and that becomes the final number that is utilized for FEMA reimbursement and for going forward with the construction.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
So I'm always really intrigued by how government works with projects and bidding. So when you're talking about bond resolution number 1, which has money left over to be used of $2 million roughly.
Correct.
And we have a bond resolution of 6.
Correct.
So if our project obviously is coming in to be 7A to match what FEMA's asking for, the same design, et cetera, and what the town body's approved, is coming in at 6.9. So does that mean if we need to spend 6.9, we can tap into this $2 million that's left in bond 1?
Correct.
Good to know.
I can't believe that.
No.
I think you'd have to, I don't
Well-
know where it would go from a governance standpoint. It would have to be approved by the,
Technically would not have to be approved. That's what I said earlier. I
That's
said
right.
that's certainly something that you want to discuss with the town bodies.
Right.
But from a bond council, from a bond resolution, from a fiscal perspective, it is available.
See, he was getting at us. We just have to ask the question.
If I might, Mr. Mayor is technically correct in terms of if you look at the strict definition of what was approved in the first bond and what was approved for authorization to spend in the second one. I think this board has been pretty clear, and I think the boards, certainly speaking for the Board of Selectmen, and I believe the Board of Finance based on our most recent meeting, and I suspect the RTM. I don't think we would want to go that way, and I think we want to come back before the boards to get approval to do that. They're expecting that. I think that is the most transparent way to do it.
We would do that.
To make sure that
Yeah.
we're aligned with everybody. So as much as there's a technical financial capability that we could do that, I would think that we would not want to go in that
No,
direction.
this committee has always done the hard thing,
Yeah.
and we've
And
been
that-
beaten up in the press for it all along. It's just always interesting to understand, to your point, technically, we wouldn't have to, even though we would, of course, do the right thing to do it. It's just interesting, because we have to weigh the option, right? 7A means we keep the lockers, and it's not within the budget. So if we remove the lockers, then we're not within FEMA. So we just have to understand.
Well, if you remove the
How it
lockers,
works.
you're within FEMA, you're not within the bond resolution, so it's the bond council telling you to go
Right,
back.
sorry.
Right.
If you go forward with this, you're over budget based on the bids you have so far,
Right.
as I understand it.
Right.
All right. And if you get back to the original bond resolution, that was for, when we looked at that being $1 million cost, that's when we thought it was a simple repair. Prop it up, put the foundation back, throw some sand back in there,
That's what we should have done.
that was an estimate that was done very fast. When we brought in the engineers to review the foundation, the work, and what needed to be done, they said, timeout. This is
Right.
not just a repair, this has got, and that took them several months to get through, and that's when we got into the whole, this could be, $5-6 million worth of work. That's when we went back and looked at different options, and that's also when we set up a building committee. If it's going to be that much, then we want to make sure we have the scrutiny of a building committee to help manage that project and that expense. But the original $1 million as part of that $5 million package was for what was understood at the time as a more simple repair to the structure.
I have a question.
Thank you. Briefly.
I was at that RTM meeting. Wasn't
Which,
that...
there's
was it-
been a number.
And this is what I'm trying to understand. Was this just after, what was the first hurricane? Not, what was the one before
No,
Sandy?
this was after Sandy.
This was
Irene.
after
It was not
Sandy.
Irene.
Okay.
This is Sandy. Sandy hit in October.
Right.
This is the January Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM meetings.
Okay.
It might have stretched over into February, but I think it was all done in January.
Okay.
It was what we call the non-recurring capital package.
Of 2013.
Of thereabouts,
Mhm.
yes. And that had, I'm going to say, about 10 different items in it.
Okay.
All right, and that's typically how we do non-recurring. They're smaller projects, typically between 100,000 and $1 million.
Mhm.
All right, so this fit right under that $1 million number, so we included that in there. The package in total got to be $5 million. As Mr. Mayor mentioned, we did some of those projects. We got some grants for some of those projects elsewhere, so we didn't even need the money that we authorized. But we were looking to get started as fast as we could on recovering from Storm Sandy. So we passed that, asked for that funding in January. We said, look, the numbers we have are less scrutinized than normal, but we want to get started, so we'd like the ability, unlike we normally do, we'd like the ability to move money from one smaller project within the $5 million to another smaller project within the $5 million, because we might be less on one and more on another, and we just haven't had time to be as thorough as we normally are. They understood, we wanted to get started, it all worked, and consequently, we have money left because we were able to get some additional funding for those projects. Does that make sense?
So, yes, thank you for that. So there was I'm just a little unclear as to the number. Was it $1 million or was it $2.5 million?
What's available is what's left in that bucket is somewhere between $2 and $2.5 million.
And just that, I would have to go.
And is eligible to be spent on any of the projects that were included in that bucket, including
Originally.
Yeah.
Right. So all it does, excuse me, is it's a softer landing if we have to go
Back
to
to
request
RTM.
additional funding.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you probably wouldn't, I mean, I don't want to disagree with the first selectman, but I'm not really here, but you probably wouldn't, since that funding's already available, you probably wouldn't ask for additional funding because you already have the funding. Or one of the things I'm doing is one of my projects, you eliminate authorizations that you're not going to utilize. So you might eliminate that authorization and increase this authorization.
I
There's
think-
multiple ways to do it.
Yeah, the issue I think at hand is how we balance the money between the initial bond resolution and this bond is just not in the purview of this board.
I could,
Okay.
I would.
I would think that you define what the project is, we'll sort out how that works. The key here is,
Thank
as
you.
I think you identified earlier, is that we want to go back to the boards, explain to them exactly what
Right.
they're doing. So, as you've done all along, like, here's full transparency and exactly what we're up to and what we're intending to do.
Right.
Right,
It's
that
just
was
the-
where I was
yeah.
going.
The last time we did that meeting, when we came up with we proposed 7 and came up with 7A, all because of funding. So it's just interesting
Yeah.
that we all understand that if we go back because 7A costs more and we believe it's the right thing to do, that after we present it and the financial piece gets presented, we're not going to be at a 7B.
That brings up a very good question, and that is, if we go forward with 7A, given the scenario that we've been discussing here briefly, and this new information, we would intend to get 7A approved. We wouldn't want to go back to the governing bodies and have yet another project imposed on us.
Yeah, no, it's...
Okay,
It,
we're there.
you have been through everything, you've evaluated it backwards and forwards, you looked at 11 different options, probably more if you looked at all the variations. You've done your work.
We know.
It's,
Yeah.
We
it's,
just want to make sure that everybody knows.
it's time to
We've been
pick
there.
one and move forward. We do have some, because the bidding prices came in high, which happens, we have to look at adjusting that. You've got a couple other possibilities in terms of, do you shrink it down or do you knock it down and rebuild it?
Right,
There's some FEMA implications in that in terms of the net cost of the town.
right.
7A has one set of net numbers, and that is the project you've already gotten approved, so everybody conceptually should understand that. The only difference is the overall cost, rather than our estimate of what it was. We now have bid prices coming back to say this is what it is. That just because of the, that will adjust the FEMA reimbursement a little bit because the numbers changed, but the concept is the same.
And again, at the, having the advantage of both of you standing here, are we correct as a committee in leaving the details of this to finance and Board of Finance? In other words, the Finance Department, Board of Finance, as far as whether we're going to, some money's coming from this pot, some money's coming from that pot. I mean, what I'm hearing now is there's, we can proceed with 7A if that happens to be the wish of the committee.
Yeah.
And that the financing is over on your side of the table where it has been, or to Ian's point, are we going to get into the details of financing the project?
And let me start with a school project, which you do a whole lot of. And there are certain rules in terms of how it's reimbursed. And to Ian's point, it's up to 27%. The percentage doesn't change. It's a question of what costs are eligible. That's what would change that. So that, I'm going to suggest that the percentage is always 27%, or whatever they're reimbursing you for. But it's not all the costs that you put into a school project might be reimbursable or deemed eligible for reimbursement. So consequently, that's going to drive the percentage down a bit. The reimbursement structure or reimbursement process is handled totally separate outside the building committee. All right, so if you sit down at a school building committee, has anybody, somebody's been.
We
to a
like
school
that model.
building
I've been
project.
through 3 or 4 of them.
Okay, so the reimbursements, the paperwork, gets filled out and gets sent up to the state. They sort through that, but typically people like Tom Cullen or Selma or Vito are involved in following up on that to making sure we actually get the money back on that. In terms of this case, having you aware of that so you can look at what the net cost is, I think is extremely important. You should be very involved into that. All right. The sitting down and sorting through the FEMA regulations and working with our FEMA consultant, when we did the debris removal and the other projects we did within the Storm Sandy cleanup, that was all done by finance. Bob has learned a lot more about FEMA reimbursement than he ever wanted to. And so I think the concept of getting the authorized funding, what's the project going to cost in terms of the 6.5 or 7 or 7.5 million dollars, that is certainly the committee's purview and what you need to do. In terms of looking at where the reimbursement comes, we've got the insurance money, that's in the bank. So you could argue whether that's in the purview of the committee or not. It's there, it's in the bank, you should know what it is. We've gone on and gotten grants. So we've gotten additional grant funds in, which is not money that you've applied for, but we've got it in. We did it, the town did it on that behalf to be used with FEMA, so we've got that money in. And FEMA's just another source of funds to help pay for this.
Okay.
All right. And the same thing with the bond resolution. At some point, there'll be a bond resolution saying we're going to bond this amount of money. And you should be aware of what that is, make sure it's accurately described, but it's not that you're not on the hook for the bond resolution itself. That's done by our bond counsel, actually, but does that make sense in terms of?
Yeah, no, it makes
So
perfect sense.
that where we have a distinction is there's an authorization to spend, then there's a source of money. All right, and we could find a source of money for $20 million, but if you've only been authorized to spend 6, we only get to do 6.
We'll focus on your authorization to spend. You'll find the money. That's where I was going with my convoluted question.
Yeah, but that's not a happy to answer any questions concerning the source of funding, so you're comfortable how that's putting together. And one of your perks on this job is you get to learn more about FEMA, I would think.
Right.
Yeah.
And the salary, the increase, which we appreciate.
Is that something we can put on our resumes?
Really. Yeah, just to be clear, I wasn't trying to scam money out of you. I just wanted to make sure
No,
that when we
it's-
do the right thing
Yeah.
and we go up in front of the board, that we're not surprised by some sort of
Yeah, I'd say-
funding or bonding
Two-
that throws us back again.
Question.
Two points, one point actually I'd like to make. If you remember way back when, the original project, when it went before the town bodies the first time around, without the lockers, was $4.7 million. And the town bodies ended up voting for $6 million with the lockers. So you could say that the town bodies valued the lockers at $1.3 million.
We have a difference of opinion on the committee about how the boards, what the board had in their mind when they voted. Some of us believe, as I do, that the board heard your speech about FEMA, and while they understood the $6 million, they also understood the FEMA adjustment and that bottom line number.
Right, no, that's
Right.
true. The $1.3 million increase in cost at a 75% reimbursement level was only a $300 and something increase to the town.
Right.
But so the net cost, yes.
Right.
But those net costs carries over. So if you're looking at apples to apples, oranges to oranges, gross cost, net
Yep.
cost, gross cost. If the gross cost is higher, the net cost is higher. So when I say that the town bodies valued the lockers at $1.3 million, gross costs, net cost, whatever 0.75 times $1.3 million is, which is 0.25, which is 250 plus 6, like 333,000 or something.
I want to see if we can
Sorry.
keep this moving.
Yeah, I think at our last meeting, we got hung up because we remembered that Mike came to one of our prior meetings and said, no contracts will be signed if we exceed the bond limit. And the bids came in way higher than the bond limit, which caused us to look at 7 instead of 7A without lockers. So I guess what you're saying is our hands are now untied because we can pick our option, and you guys are going to worry about the money, and if we have to go back to the town bodies, we'll go back. Is that what I'm hearing? Because we have this other
That-
money
that-
available.
That may have been what you heard at the time. I don't think that's what I meant, and let me just clarify that. There's an amount of money that you're authorized to spend. So there's a bond resolution, but I'm going to ask you just put that aside for a moment. There's an amount of money that you're authorized to spend. That's your limit. Period.
Okay.
The bond resolution is like a source of funds. We're going to go out to the market and borrow. All right, and we may borrow the whole amount, or we may borrow some smaller amount as part of that. We're authorized to borrow it all, but how much we borrow is based on whatever grants we get, whether insurance recovery we get, that type of thing. But you're authorized to spend a certain amount, and that's what that is. So, in this case, you're authorized to spend $6 million in one case, and we've got a couple million else in another one. But I just would focus on the January or the February 15 resolution, what you're authorized to spend, and if we're going to go over that, I would ask you to just go back to the boards for reauthorization.
I think we understand.
That keeps it simple.
Okay.
I'm going to go down the table.
All right.
Ellery, is
Yeah,
there more?
from what I understand,
Can I just, I don't know your name, the young lady.
Jane.
Jane.
Oh, young lady, that's better.
As Jane points out, there's gross monies and net monies. And this is intriguing. And Jim and I talked about this, the chair and I talked about this recently. You could actually spend more money to not have the lockers than you would spend to have the lockers.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's possible, yes.
So if you took, for example,
Yeah, you-
a $6 million project that did not have the lockers, and if, because that was a repair project, and if you took 500,000, and if you said FEMA, let's say FEMA accepted 5.5 million of that as eligible costs, and only disallowed 500,000, then the town costs, under that scenario, the net town costs would be greater than 7A, if FEMA accepted 7A.
Actually, it's a little worse, because they throw you into an improved project, which I understand from the conversation is one step down from a repair project. And an improved project, you have to justify everything.
Yeah, it's, I don't want to,
Right, we don't want to go
I think the
back.
committee
FEMA
understands
has, I've been working with FEMA, on not this project. We have collected, the town, since the storm, has collected $2.8 million from FEMA. Okay? So it's not like FEMA is terrible to work with.
Right.
FEMA has worked with us, but every one of those collections, and we've pretty much, done okay. Every one of those collections for all the PWs, the multiple number of PWs that make up that $2.8 million, right? All of them required additional information, additional discussion, additional negotiation. And just FEMA's a bigger, Penfield is a bigger project, more money for the specific project, and lots of variabilities. So the negotiation discussion process is, as you all know, is taking a bit longer. And as the chair just indicated, we believe, I believe, based on all my conversations with the state, with FEMA, that 7A, not a slam dunk, not 100%, but very, very, very high probability that it would be recognized as a 50% eligible project. You get down into the no lockers, which where you're reducing function, reducing capacity, and design, it's just another quagmire of discussions. Chair is correct.
Okay, let's just hold for a minute. I'd like to, we're cognizant of our guests here, and you had,
Ellery actually asked the same.
okay.
I'm now getting more thoroughly confused, talking about FEMA reimbursement. We are, my understanding, new to the committee, is we have 6.028 million up to that limit to spend. We're over that right now with
Right.
7A.
Yes.
But that's a funding request. You go back and ask for more money.
So we have a decision.
There's nothing to do,
All right.
Right.
we want to know the net costs of the town, we want to know what the reimbursement is, because we have a responsibility to the town, which has been articulated up and down the table. But we're not in that business, frankly.
And I agree we should stay out of that business, but I think we have to present the two options, whatever that may be, and then let someone else figure out what the reimbursement will be or net cost to the town. I think we're talking a lot about this.
Can I just get a clarification of, again, when we start this project, we keep taking things out to try to get close to our number. FEMA sat down with our design plans and came up with a cost. One of the issues I have is there's very few contingencies. Does FEMA have contingencies in their thing? Because you said that if they go over, they're responsible for overruns. I don't understand how that could work. So I'd be curious to see if we could line up what FEMA says, but we're probably talking about two different projects, right? We have taken so many things out of the project since day one.
Well, I think that's the point that Bob was making, that you take their worksheet and our scope of work and make sure that they're aligned.
I don't see how that could be.
I don't know what you mean by how it could be. It's basically the town takes 7A, excluding all the takeouts. The recommendation that the first selectman earlier made from his perspective. Take 7A without the takeout. That's kind of what I think the first selectman was talking about. Can you take that and you go into FEMA and you say, this is what we think should satisfy a replacement project? You discuss, you go through, line by line, and you come to an agreement. Or you don't. Now, Whit believes, I believe, there's a very, very strong likelihood we would come to agreement. And then now you have a project. During that process, you're not talking about money. You're talking about scope. You're talking about what you're going to do. Construction laws. It's got nothing to do with money. So now there's an agreed project, a mutually agreed project. Then you go out and you price the project. And that price becomes the FEMA eligible number.
Could I just maybe add one little dimension
Please.
here? If you really would like, if you want to address this maybe in the terms of the real world, this project has been out to bid, public bid, and the bids have been vetted out by the construction manager. There's a problem with the largest and bidder in general trades, and so it's likely that you would have to select a second bidder. It's my understanding if you selected the second bidder, and Swig is here, you would then have a completely bid project, a publicly bid project, and you'd be able to develop a GMP if you were given the okay to use the second bidder in general trades. Is that correct?
After we reconfirm with the subcontractors that they are still, will still maintain their bids.
Did we have a provision in the bidding sequence or procedures where they had to hold their price?
For, I believe, 90 days.
So they have to hold their price for 90 days, and and the only flaw in the ointment at the moment is the fact that you've got a disqualified low bidder in the general trades.
No.
Is that a fair statement?
No, I agree with that, with what you're saying, but we also have to reconfirm.
You
with the
gotta use the lectern, sorry.
Sorry. We also need to reconfirm with the subcontractors that they will hold their bids for that 90-day period.
Well, do they get an option? If the bid documents say their bids are valid for 90 days, they don't have an option.
Technically, they do not.
But their bids were presented to us in July.
Okay,
So their 90-day period runs through mid-October.
okay.
So what we need to do is reconfirm with them. We have to find out from the committee the schedule, when we're going to be able to go
Okay.
out and do this. There's a lot of different things that
But I don't
have
want to go any
happen.
further down this road, other than just the answers we've gotten here so far. The bids are
I
good
don't
for
see
90
bond
days.
counsel here.
Yes.
I see town
The
attorney.
the inclusion of the second bidder to resolve the the only disqualified low bidder would bring the project in at about $600,000 over budget. I could go look at the number, but I think that's a
Yeah, I
fair,
think that, yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
to your point, there's about $300,000 worth of stuff that were value engineered out, which are alternate ads.
Correct.
Is that a fair statement?
Yep, that's correct.
So the number is not $6.6 million, it's $6.9 million. Within the $6.9 million, there's still $450,000 worth of contingency. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the project, if it were to go forward as 7A and take advantage of the 75% reimbursement, stop me if there's a problem here, the project would be a $6.9 million project. We'd get what we'd want. We'd go in with a 10% contingency. And we'd have upside protection because FEMA's going to pay 75% of total project of cost, expended cost for construction at the end of this.
Yes.
You shouldn't be nodding, Bob should be nodding.
Yes.
Okay.
So if it comes in at $8 million, nothing has changed, we're still in good shape?
Correct, as long as you follow the scope.
No.
No disrespect intended, I just can't believe it.
Okay,
It's
but
not,
that's
because it's not true.
an extreme. You're not, when you match
You're
the
right.
scopes with the
When you match the scopes,
it's going to be unforeseen conditions.
I mean,
It's going to be the fact that of the 28 beams underneath that building, that we know 14 of them are bad, that actually 18 of them are bad. So you're going to have to protect your contingency, you're going to have to work hard at making, it's just like you had a car insurance or whatever it may be, or just like we talked about insurance when the insurance settlement was made. One of the prolonged negotiations and discussions was what happens regarding unforeseen conditions. Is the town willing to take the money now rather than later? So we'll have that scenario where we're going to have to fight. It's not going to be easy. I don't see an $8 million project.
But you indicate to me then that my concern about contingencies become less of an issue, because you don't need contingencies, because again, if something was unforeseen, that's not is that a contingency? Maybe I need a clarification, what constitutes a contingency? Because I was been harping on my concern about the little amount of contingencies because of the track record of old projects of having overruns.
Right.
Again, if you focus on what you're authorized to spend, if you go back to the boards and you're given $7 million to spend, that's what you get to spend. You don't get to spend $1 more. I don't care who reimburses you. You do not get to spend $1 more
That's the
without
point.
going back to the boards.
That's the point. Now, the finance and Board of Finance, but particularly finance, working with FEMA, have an opportunity to maximize reimbursement. But we're not there every day, every month at the table maximizing reimbursement. We're getting the project in for 6.9 or 7, whatever we're going to come up with.
Yeah, and FEMA actually came closer to the number than you guys came to when you picked the 6.0 number. They came in at 6.6. So they're actually very
I appreciate
close
that. That's
Right.
to where you are,
Even using memes.
even using names.
We don't want to take too much advantage of the opportunity we have here, but go ahead.
I just have another,
Go.
picking
Go
up where I
with it.
left before. I think, Bob, you were saying that, and I wrote it down, that the 6.6 million, you called a rebuild.
You know,
Or is it
I don't
repair?
think- I
Is
mean,
it repair or is it replace?
it's replaced.
Let's replace.
Okay. And the numbers we were,
50% qualifying project.
and the numbers we were working with were repair.
The number we were working, correct. We called, obviously, the east wing is a replacement. That's a no-brainer.
Right.
The west wing, we called a repair.
Right.
But if we can, if necessary, we might be required to assure FEMA that the repair that we're salvaging, they will let you salvage on a replacement, and we're saying we're salvaging the whole building.
Right.
And they're saying that's okay with them as long as it's a lower cost than a brand-new building. That's what they're saying.
Okay, because our number for a new building from the last meeting, I think, was over $11 million.
For the whole facility.
Right.
Right.
Which is a big spread between that and 6.6. So when you're talking about getting together and meeting of the minds and all that other kind of stuff, I'm sitting here thinking, how do we close that gap
Well, that's
between
not the gap.
6.6 and $11 million?
No.
No,
No,
you're doing, there is no gap there.
All right.
It's a different project.
All right.
Totally different project.
All right.
Financially, a much more intelligent project.
All right,
It's
one more
$4 million
que-
less.
Yes.
One more question. This WP that you received from FEMA, the $6.6 million, the
PW.
project work paper, you called it. Is that their statement of eligibility? Are they saying that this is our number and this is all eligible?
They're
Do they
saying,
say that?
they're saying that if we were, they're saying this is what they think it's going to cost to put the thing back the way it was totally with standards and codes, new standards and codes.
When did they-
Elevation, the whole thing.
When did
right?
they-
What we have to do now, and what we're in the process of doing, is going through what they have submitted to us to confirm that we think it fits and will allow us to do everything that we want to do. Once we complete going through it, then we'll identify any shortfalls, if there are any, and then we'll sit down and discuss with them, and there'll be a discussion and a negotiation.
When does FEMA determine eligibility? After the project is already up?
No, when the scope is aligned. When we agree,
Okay.
which we're thinking is a
So-
month to 2-month project.
So that has not been determined with the project work paper.
Project worksheet is their interpretation of what it should take.
Right.
We are evaluating that right now to conclude if it's complete or if there's something that they left out.
May I ask, excuse me, I'm interrupting, but I'm just, if we go to the table with a detailed public bid, in other words, a market representation of our project, does that influence them?
I would not do that until after the scope is aligned.
Okay.
That was my concern, is the marketplace has said they can't do it for 6.6.
Line the scope, we get an agreement, then we go out to bid.
Okay.
Everybody knows the direction we're
Glad this is all going to
headed.
be in your department. Do you have a question as we try to conclude this portion of
I'd just like to clarify this and answer Ellery's question, because I think there's more of an answer to it. So FEMA, and Bob, you can verify this, you can check all the FEMA regs, because I've read most of them. First of all, the FEMA documents that they would have sent out, and if we had copies of them to see ourselves, would say, as all FEMA programs such as this, which are reimbursement programs, say, and I quote, up to 75%. They don't say 75%, they say up to 75%. And Mr. Tetro gave us a great example of the school reimbursement. And the difference between, there is a difference between the school reimbursement project and the FEMA reimbursement project, and that is the school reimbursement project is pretty much a given formula. Although they don't guarantee, and I'm sure you'll agree, they won't guarantee that you're going to get everything back. Historically, we have seen, as has every other community that's done a school project, that you pretty much know, I think it was 27% or whatever the number was, you pretty much know what you're going to wind up with. The FEMA reimbursement program is entirely different. And Ellery, to your question, which is a great question, we won't know from FEMA how much of that quote-unquote up to 75% we will be eligible for until after this project is completely built and
I
done.
disagree with that.
And there are numerous articles that have been published, some of which I've shown to this committee as well as to Mr. Mayor, that detail exactly what other communities have gone through, even when FEMA has approved their project, has approved their worksheet, and then has come in after the final project when the town is seeking reimbursement. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, I won't say that FEMA nickel and dime, but for whatever reason, FEMA decided that, well, maybe we said we were going to pay for this, but we're not paying for this now. And this is documented, so it's easy to show in print and verifiable that this program is different than the school reimbursement program.
Okay.
If I
Go
might,
ahead.
just to
Yes,
clarify.
please.
The school reimbursement is not black and white. We are not guaranteed that stuff. There's much negotiation that goes on as part of that. I spent 6 months working on the school reimbursement program when I was back on the RTM. There's major negotiation that goes on with that. And in some of those cases where you don't get that, we actually have state legislation that gets passed to include the reimbursement to us, called notwithstanding legislation, which is a pretty regular occurrence.
Right.
So I don't mean to, I'm not talking
No,
about this project,
right.
but I don't want you thinking the school reimbursement's black and white.
Right.
We have more practice at it because we're doing them more and more, so we'll
Absolutely.
probably narrow the gap from, but there's a complete, and when you're done, there is an audit that can take, frankly, 4 or 5 years later to review before you get your complete retainage back
Right.
on that. So that there's a very significant review that takes place
But-
on the school projects also.
Again, with you both standing there, I have the very distinct impression that we go for the money. If we need more money, we should go ask for it. That you both, in your respective roles and responsibilities, together with the Board of Finance, will resolve these questions and issues as far as reimbursement is concerned, because they might be interested, I would think they would. But our goal as a building committee is to define the project, ask for the funding, and build the project. Or did I miss something?
No, I think, I would agree with that. The only qualifier I'd put in is you want to have enough understanding of the guidelines for FEMA reimbursement.
So we know how to do
That
it.
you do your best.
Right,
to
to
take
maximize
that- to
the
take that into
reimbursement.
consideration.
Absolutely.
But there isn't a project where, there isn't a project we've done that we get a guaranteed reimbursement on, period, regardless of what the program is. We just don't. To the extent that, is there an absolute guarantee or certainty of exactly the dollar amount you're going to get until the project's done, reviewed and audited? No. There isn't a state agency with money that's going to sign up for something like that. However, based on the guidelines, based on the project, as Mr. Mayor was saying, that there are things you can do that are closer to the project or closer to the guidelines than further out. There are certain things you can do that if there's a grayscale, you're closer to the black side being in the black as opposed to being out on the other side. So I think if you're looking for a guarantee, that's really hard to get. If you're looking for a sense of reliability, that's reasonable. And I think that's what Mr. Mayor can help us with.
Actually, what we're looking for is the money.
Should we just pursue when Ian said we won't know, Bob shook his head and said no. Could you just one more time tell us why you feel so confident that once this design is negotiated between FEMA and us, that from our point of view, we can proceed?
We don't have to know
Well,
that.
that's all right, but it's a good question.
It's a good question, but we don't have to know.
There's rules, there's regulations,
There.
there's process, there's history.
We want
This-
$7
this-
million
this-
bucks.
This consultant that we're working with, WIT, international in scope, one of the largest one of the largest consulting groups that works with FEMA, significant experience, Katrina, tornadoes, typhoons, hurricanes, floods, so knowledgeable, well-respected on Capitol Hill and the Beltway. So A, we are dependent upon their interpretation to some extent, for sure. Secondly, there's law, there's rule. The rules basically say that if the scope is aligned, if it's a green income project, and you follow that scope, you get the 75%.
Okay, and you
You
say
know,
we're
and-
about
and-
2 months away from
you
that
know,
process?
And if you, if there's something there that they don't want to pay for, like for example, if you take this $4.5 million, if it's a $7 million project, you have $4.5 million that's eligible for reimbursement. If you say that they disallow, if you will, $500,000 of that, for whatever reason, then that would cost the town an extra $375,000. It would still keep us in that $900,000 to $1.5 million range that was mentioned months ago.
And you say we're about 2 months away from that alignment process?
That's my hope and expectation. I've probably
Again, it's their problem. We want the
over
7
hopeful
million.
in the past, stuff that you guys all know, but
You want to
the only
push
thing I
over
called
the
right was
deadline
we get
process
the PW in
forward.
September. Other than that, everything took longer than I
Somebody gave me
anticipated.
excuse me, Bob, it was two
I'm sorry.
questions.
Yeah,
to one.
that's okay.
But no, if we were funded for the amount that we need to do it, we would start the project.
Fair enough.
We've heard plenty about that. Any questions? You've been pretty quiet.
I got nothing more to add to this. No. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I think
Yeah.
just we have a good background and understanding and reasoning for the FEMA reimbursement. Talked at it ad infinitum, and that should factor into our decision. But again, we're not filing for reimbursement. The committee's not filing for that.
Right.
It's the town doing that.
But we're certainly going to have to cooperate in the process.
Understand.
Yeah.
Rich, do you have anything?
No, I think you just said exactly what I would have said, and no, nothing, I understand it.
Okay, on behalf of the committee, thank you both. I thought this was going to get you on early and get you out early, but
Never.
appreciate it.
Just one final thought. I do appreciate you coordinating the agenda and the date of this meeting with our schedules. I do apologize for missing the last meeting. There was, at least somebody raised a question as to where I was at that time. We had a Board of Select meeting at the same time, and I was unable to find a way to be in two different places.
This
So I
worked out
do-
better.
So I do apologize for that, but, and again, Chairman Bradley's been very good about coordinating my schedule, so it is a busy time of year, so certainly happy to attend any time you would like going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Okay. So we might be able to get a little bit closer to our agenda. We find ourselves in a situation where we have two projects. One that I believe Shawmut has been working on as far as the final numbers or the better numbers as far as the project without the lockers. That's the easiest way to describe it. And the other is, and I don't know whether the committee's going to go down that road now from what we've heard over the past 72 hours, or what the town has learned over the past 72 hours. The other project that was on the table when we broke up last time was the basic project, 7A, with the lockers. And what we've heard tonight is that 7A is a viable project as far as FEMA's concerned, that it can be, that they would consider it within the 50% rule, within the 75% reimbursement, and consider it a replacement project. I think there is a caveat in there about the fact that they could ask for proof that the repair of the west wing was less than the replacement of the west wing. So we are assuming, and in the discussion with the FEMA consultant, the reference was made to salvaging the west wing as part of a replacement project, if that makes any sense. That said, we have two agenda items here. They both refer to the two different projects. Would seem to me we'd want to hear first about what steps do we have to take, or where are we with the original 7A project? We started to flirt with the discussion while the first selectman and Bob Mayer were here. I made the assumptions that, and I think I saw some head nodding, I made the assumptions that the 7A is still a valid project, although the clock runs out in mid-October. But right as we're sitting here tonight, it's a publicly bid, valid project. And, well, it's not, because it has a key disqualified trade contractor. And if you were to go to the second bidder, which would be the normal procedure, your low bidder's disqualified, you go to the second bidder, right?
Correct.
And if you go to the second bidder, that number, and we have it, because you gave it to us last time, is $6.6 million, $6.5 million.
That figure was 6.7 million.
And that gives us a project to the bid documents, the construction documents, rather. In other words, that gives us a fully designed, functioning project.
With the list of approved
Alternate ads?
Alternate ads, yes.
And if you were to include the approved alternate ads, what does that list amount to?
$330,000.
$330,000.
Yeah.
So, should we be talking about this project? Is this project indeed viable if we had to go back for additional funding? Does this project, let's say we were successful in obtaining additional funding, assuming that it's going to be reimbursed, which is what we just heard for the past hour and 20 minutes, could we proceed with that project? Could you, as our construction manager, pull together a GMP that included the project as we always wanted it, the design, the construction documents? Are the construction documents what this committee wants?
I hope so.
Okay.
Yeah, the set of drawings that was put out is the...
Sorry.
Thank you very much. The bid documents that all the numbers are based on are the final documents. There have been no changes to them. So that's the full project with the
Right.
lockers and all the other parts of the program.
So as a baseline, the final documents were bid, and how much do the final documents cost in your estimate? In other words, if this committee were to say, we've heard enough, I'm not saying we're saying this, but let's just take this as an option. I hate to even use the word option. But the design documents were approved by the committee, were bid. And they were bid under a couple of different circumstances, because we had an unqualified low bidder and we have some reductions that we assumed because we were worried about both contingency and we were worried about an overrun. The market beat us to the punch by really socking us. But, so what is that number? Is it is it the adding in the second bidder and adding in the $300,000? Does that give us the project that the engineer and architect designed?
It gives us that project with the caveat that we have not interviewed the second low bidder yet, so we haven't reviewed his scope
Right.
as yet.
Right.
Two, that we are not too sure of what the schedule is for the project, when we'll actually be starting. I mean, if we're going to be starting in the winter, we have to take a look at winter conditions. If we're going to start in the late winter, early spring, we're going to have to look at labor rates, because prevailing wage rates change in July 2016. So if we're pushing it out, we need to reconfirm with these subcontractors their new wage rates.
So the question...
Just one
Yes.
point of clarification, on the general
They
trade
have to
bids,
go
we
up
have an
to-
extra month, right?
Right, we do, because that another month on the general trades.
Okay. I might ask, Twig, and I appreciate your being here tonight, is there anything about this discussion from the purchasing standpoint that raises flags?
No. Just the concern that we're running out of road here.
Right. We were advised at the last meeting that you ordinarily would not advise this committee to go back a third time or put the project out to bid a second time.
That's correct.
Okay. Does projects like this get stale in the market?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Am I correct? If we have to go back through the process, there's no way we're going to be able to do it within 90 days. If we have to go back and ask for more money.
Well, it's even less than 90 days, because that clock is running.
Right. So it almost means that we can't do it. In other words, I can't see, if we decided tonight that this is, we're gonna go back and get approval, and they said we should go back for approval for the, say, $7 million is a round number. We can't do it within a time frame to assure that if we got that approval, we'd be able to lock these contractors in within 90 days.
Very good point. Good point. Is there any precedent for extending the bids, having the trade contractors extend their bids? Or do you just wrap this up and start again?
You could go back to the subcontractor and ask them to extend their bids.
Is that a normal, not normal, but is that acceptable to the purchasing authority?
It is.
It probably comes with a price?
Possibly, I don't know, I can't answer that. I mean, it would be, what we would like to do is ask them to extend their bids with no change in price. But I would still have to tell them what, as far as the schedule, when we can actually start the project. Because
Right.
those kind of factors will affect their bids.
It's my understanding that this committee, if it decides to, I asked that question of the first selectman, I'm sorry I didn't grab him before he left, but that he thought that going through, that under the best circumstances, this committee would go through the governing bodies or the authorizing bodies with bid in hand, with a firm number, not an estimate, in the month of December, by the time we got ourselves organized and got the FEMA alignment. So if that's true, you're talking about by the first of the year, it's somewhere in January, early February, an authorization to proceed, preparation of a GMP and an authorization to proceed.
Correct. And we would have to verify that with the subcontractors, that there'd be no change in bid price.
Right. All I was trying to do here is get at least one option on the table with as much information as possible. I apologize to the committee. Let's start with questions and issues. On this, on 7A, where are we, what should we be doing? Just 7A. We can look at the other one later if we want to.
So I think there's ways we can do what you're saying, given the time frame. If we went with the right contingency we wanted to have, which would include the contingency we're concerned about, as well as contingency for a delayed start. And it's not a true bid in hand, it has some contingencies on it, but I think that's the way to do that if we choose this option.
Would you be worried about going back out to market with in other words, asking them for another 90 days? Is that normal? Do you see that?
I have seen that, but it usually comes with a price. And it's not because you're just asking for 90 days, it's because of where the project, I agree, it's where the project starts. You're talking about authorization proceeding in January.
Right.
How much we don't know what winter's gonna be like. So I think when I was a contractor, a subcontractor, I wanted to know when I was going to start and what it did to my labor rates as a
Right.
prevailing wage. So there's real cost. It's not a ransom. If you go out and ask, it's typically not, you're not,
Right.
it's not a ransom.
If they know they have the job, and they know it's a real job, then you're in a better negotiating position.
Correct.
Ryan?
You know, I'm kind of speechless. I'm just struck by the fact that this committee would even consider 7A again.
I'm not asking the committee to do that. All I was trying to do is present what 7A means tonight.
So I think what 7A means tonight is that we have once again been influenced by news that we've heard. Because as of last week, we were off 7A, we were kind of back towards 7. And I guess I would ask the chair this question, other than town or state regulations, which I know we have to follow, if we were doing this project, whether it was option 7, option 7A, or option 12, and our learned professionals in design and building came back to us and said, yeah, we see the plans. We can build this building for X number of dollars. Let's call it $6 million. Regulations aside,
Right.
would we then say, okay, that sounds good, go ahead and do it, without having it go out to bid?
Well, you wouldn't not put it out to bid.
Right, even if you didn't have to, right? You would
Right.
still put it out to bid, even though the trained professionals said, oh yeah, here's page 2, page 3, page 4. We can build this thing for 7. You'd still go out to bid,
Of
right?
a rebid or a bid?
No,
Original bid.
let's a brand new project. Let's say any project.
There's no better test than the market.
Right. So you go out to bid. And in doing so, I would assume the rationale would be to make sure that the number that your learned professionals gave you was in fact the number that you could build it for. Right?
Well, no, I don't know whether, I'm not testing them.
I'm not
testing
either.
the market.
No, any
The market,
professionals.
it's one of the last remaining markets. It's an auction. It's one of the last remaining markets where it's an auction. You have 3 or 4 bidders, they respond to your project, and they give you a price. You ordinarily would not go out without competitively bidding a project.
Okay, I'm getting a little bit too much into the weeds. I guess my question is, would we just take upon hearsay from our expert tradespeople, in the design and development and building community, in looking at a set of plans, and then give them the green light and say, okay, you told us that you can build this building for X number of millions of dollars, go build it.
We wouldn't, and we didn't.
Good, okay. So then I have to ask this question. We heard from another expert in town, the chief fiscal officer, who has once again given us information, and we've changed our mind, it looks like, going back to 7A instead of 7, based upon the information that he did, but we didn't go out and ask him to bid. In other words, we didn't get the documentation to support what we would have received from a bid that we would have received subsequent to our professional builders and architects telling us how much they could build the building for. So why would we go back and change once again without verifying, without going out to bid, so to speak, that what we heard was accurate?
Well, you go back and forth, and I understand why. You go back and forth across the line, which I don't go back and forth across. We were told tonight by about as high as you can get here, other than the RTM, from the first selectman and the chief fiscal officer, that our job was to, if we felt we could, that he's telling us that FEMA, that his understanding of FEMA, what they've received from FEMA, and what the FEMA consultant is saying, that works for the town, that 7A will be considered, can be, could be, I don't know what words are being used, as a replacement project and 75% reimbursable. That's probably not the right way to say it, but, so, if we want to, if we think it's in the best interest of the town to totally rebuild the Penfield Pavilion, rebuilding the West Wing, replacing just 7A, that's what we should do. We should go back to the authorizing bodies and get our $7 million, sounds like a little bit more at the moment, but get our $7 million and proceed. And we can't spend any more than that. So we got to put our contingency in there. We've got to make sure that those bid numbers are right, to your point of testing the market. I'm comfortable with the fact that it's, and I said it, if you might recall, 3 or 4 times, and several times, that's their problem. The venue for this discussion is Board of Finance, or RTM. They have to, the first selectman and the chief fiscal officer, have to prove to the people that are giving us the money that they can replace it or
I think you're right.
supplement it.
I mean,
And we said that, excuse me, we said that in the very beginning, we weren't going to get into their business.
If we had this $6.9 million numbers laid out that FEMA gave us, and we gave it to our people, and they looked at it and they said, I think FEMA did a good job, then I think, well, my concern is, if we want to quickly start the process and go back, and let's say for sake of argument, we go back to the whole council, they say, all right, fine, we said 6 million, now we'll give you 7, and then find out that we can't even build it for, we can't do it for 7. It would seem to me we got to be absolutely sure when we go back to the well that we can deliver
Right.
on that. My only concern
Hence
is...
my questions.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I think we need.
So this brings me back to our last meeting where I floated an idea that, as with so many of my ideas, went nowhere.
That's not true. A lot of your ideas go places.
Yeah, right, to never be seen again.
May I approach the
If
board?
I were...
Hold it, excuse me. Yeah, in a minute.
If I were the business person running this operation, and I said business person because I realize that, there's certain things involved in being a committee chair other than business. But if I were the business person...
Patience being one.
Yeah, right, insanity being another. But if I were the business person running this committee, if this committee wasn't, a town-wide committee, it was a normal business committee, I would say, you know what? We've been given X number of dollars, $6 million. We've been given $6 million. We understand that there is an organization out there called FEMA that's going to give us a reimbursement of up to 75% if we follow, same fit, form, function, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have a building that's there now that we are fairly confident that we can, adjust it, raise it, lift it, move it, and everything, but there might be a lot of things that we could find.
Right.
We've all agreed. Or we could say, you know what? We have $6 million to spend. So this way, we don't have to go back to ask for more money. What can we build, brand new, that will give us similar, size, form, function, whatever? What can we build for $6 million, brand new, to not have the worries about what we might find when we move the building or when we open the walls? We may have smaller lockers or no lockers. Well, we'd have to have some lockers, obviously, if we wanted to stay with the same fit, form, and function. We may have a smaller banquet hall, we may have a smaller this, but we would have a brand-new building that we could build within our budget.
With reasonable contingency.
With reasonable, yes, with reasonable contingencies. So let's say a $5.5 million building that would be brand new, that we wouldn't have to worry about because it would be built to current FEMA standards. And that would save us from having to go back to try and get more money, which I think, is going to be interesting at this juncture in time in the election process and the year and the amount of time that we've been here as a building committee. And we would have a brand-new building that would do what we want it to do.
If we do that, we're going to have to go in front of them anyways.
Yeah.
Right, but we wouldn't have to ask for more money.
But it's the same time process.
But I don't know if that's entirely true, because the $6 million the $6 million request was based off of presentations made by the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Finance, subsequently to the RTM, that these are our assumptions coinciding with the design. This is why we're requesting it, because this ends up being a net cost to the town. So $6 million isn't necessarily a pot. That's our authorization to spend based on certain assumptions. If we change that and we're shrinking the building down by 50%, which is essentially part of what you're talking about, well, to replace as is $11 million.
Right.
A $6 million project, you're shrinking it down significantly.
Okay.
And then it changes our FEMA equation. Then we're not at a 1.2. We're at like a 2. We're at probably maybe a 2 to 2.5 net cost.
No, it keeps our FEMA equation even lower because it is now absolutely, without any question, a new build. A new build.
Get the reimbursement fee.
Right. Is assured the reimbursement from FEMA.
No, it's not.
Not if you
Well,
shrink
the
it.
75%. If you say same form, I can show you a letter from FEMA that says
Okay.
this. I'd be happy to show you. I've got it right here.
I respect your position here. This is a committee, and you're making a very good point. Bob, you just came back down with some additional information?
Yeah, before I introduce this, with respect to, if I was at that same roundtable in that business group, as a businessman myself, before I retired and came back to work here, I would be saying, what's the net cost? Not the authorized cost. I'd be saying, what's the net cost? And the other comment is, form, capacity, function, and design. So this half building is not fully funded. Anyway, I came down because I promised I would go upstairs and search my email. I just did one copy. It's a 6-page document. It says, note on the first page, the effective cost share for this application is 75%. On the last page, it says total cost, $6,590,000.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, we actually get a copy? We don't have to go scrub the server?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hillary server.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I can circulate this to the committee,
Yes, sir.
and I might even read it.
Oh, my gosh.
Hmm?
Need bigger glasses.
Mr. Secretary?
We were going down the committee to find out is what you believe, how we should proceed with 7A, right?
That was the first thing on the table.
Well,
There was a
I don't think we
couple
should-
other things.
Well, but I think everybody didn't have a chance
Yeah,
to
no,
speak. I'm
we
sorry.
got,
Did you speak to 7A?
no, we're going to go around a little bit,
Oh.
but I was just curious, it's been on this side of the table, it's been a
We've been
little...
monopolizing the conversation.
I
I don't
know.
think that's appropriate.
It's fine. We've always tried to do the right thing, what we felt was the right thing for the town. Understanding program, understanding what was there before, understanding what the RTM approved. The RTM and the representing the town believes that 7A was the right thing to do. I agree with Ian that we get waylaid all the time about what's happening with FEMA, which is why I asked the question, is there anything else we need to know? And there isn't. They're going to handle it. I believe we should do the right thing, and the right thing is what this town wants is the lockers and the program, and if that means that our bid process was incorrect up front, which we could not have expected, I believe we should go back to the town. When you look at everything we're taking out, and even the letter from the Flood and Erosion Commission, I mean, we're starting to not just take away some functionality, we're taking away safety precautions that we promised that we would leave in there just to make a $6 million number. And if that number's wrong, I believe we should let the boards know about it and let them revote. And 7A, we have always said was, with a few exceptions, was the right thing to do. So I think 7A should be in play. Thanks.
Thank you. Hillary, going down?
I'll go next, if you don't mind.
All right.
I think 7A is a viable project, and with what I heard, the overages are going to be covered by FEMA, and we're being guaranteed by the government and finance that this is going to happen. I mean, that's the way I see it. We should go ahead with 7A.
Thank you, Rich. Hillary?
Based upon what I heard, I'm comfortable with 7A. Keeping in mind that it's not our responsibility as to how it gets funded, I think that's right. But I think we should just stick to our charge.
But implicit in that is we'd have to go back for ask for more money, though, right?
Yes.
Is that implicit in your comment? We should do
Yeah,
7A?
yeah,
just
but
ask
I-
for more
but I
money to do
also
7A.
heard-
As you indicate, it can be done.
But I also heard that there is funding already available from that other bond that I think we didn't know about previously.
What have you heard?
I think this is sort of a late developing thing, this reconsideration of 7A. This is after, over the last 3 days, essentially.
Well, it's been on the table, it is on the
It is
agenda.
on the
was
table,
the last
yeah.
agenda.
No, I know, but getting this stuff in, I think that we're, again, and I do share some skepticism, some of Ian's skepticism approaching this. But what Bob said when he came back in here is what we as a committee need to at least understand is the net cost. Because when we went from 7 to 7A, it was this the rationale for the Board of Selectmen and Bob for recommending that change was that this works out better net cost. And as a committee, we said, or we voted as a committee, not everyone, it wasn't unanimous. We said, okay, because of that, this is what we're going to go. So I think that I'm comfortable moving ahead with finalizing the cost of 7A, but I think that net cost equation from Bob and his department needs to accompany that, and it needs to be presented to us at that time. We need to know at least his rationale for recommending it to us and the net cost at the end of the day. We're not responsible for finding the funding for that. We're going to be cooperating, but that's something that needs to come into play.
Steve?
I started off, but I agree that, well, pretty much what's been said about if 7A was what the town wanted, we're now learning that 7A falls outside of our authorization to spend. You bring it back and say, I go with two options. 7A at a higher authorization or a lesser project. That gets run through the model by finance, and they can, on the heels of the presentation of those two options, then says the net cost of the town using these two would be X. Decisions made, we start building something.
Steve, you made a couple of comments at the last meeting about, and I think you started it like 3 meetings ago, and that was the condition of the existing building. And Michelangelo had to leave, but a year ago we had it re-inspected by the forensic engineer and it cleared. Joe went over there at my request after our last meeting and feels comfortable about the building. I wish he was here, but he had another meeting. And I believe we heard from Shama that as you walk through that building with trade contractors and so forth, there wasn't anybody who was balking about the condition of the building. Is that a fair statement, or is that?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm still sensitive to that risk, but it sounds like, to a point that's been made between you and Bob and between us, that if in fact there is hidden damage or greater damage, that FEMA's paying 75% of total project cost. That was what he said, and that's what I heard from the FEMA consultant.
Right.
So does that modify or reduce your concerns?
No, but I
About
think,
paying for it?
because maybe I'm the one who's really confused here, because we keep talking about what's reimbursable, what's not reimbursable. If we get authorization to spend $6 million or $7 million, we have to do a project of $6 or $7 million.
That's us.
That's what we have to worry about.
Right.
Whether it's getting reimbursed or not, or that's not in our.
But my question still stands, and that is, as far as the condition of the existing building, would you increase the contingency?
Yeah.
Would you ask the forensic engineer to come back and look at it again? Or are you comfortable going with what we're going with?
No, my concern is not only it's the light fixtures, all the other things that we don't know. I think the contingency, we've got to protect that as best we can. I think it's low going in right now for a renovation
So
project.
the question is, can we go in with $7 million with our existing contingencies? Or in order to take with $7 million, if that's the number, do we have to find other ways to get more contingencies? Or do we go in for $7.5 million to have reasonable contingencies? That's my only concern is, take one,
That's gonna
go
be a
back,
question that's
go
gonna-
back again, if we go back for this money, be absolutely sure that, again, based upon known information, we can do this.
I agree with you.
Because
So
again,
we have
I agree.
7A on the table, and I need more feedback.
I haven't heard anyone say they don't want 7A. I think the only question is if we want to go with 7A, is what do we think it's cost, and how do we go back and justify that cost to the bodies? I don't hear.
So the committee, as far as an agenda item, is discuss 7A. And after hearing from the fiscal officer and the first selectman, should we hold an abeyance at the moment this particular discussion and look at the alternative project? Because did I hear a comment somewhere from this side about going back with an option, or at least having finance go through a net cost to the town on both options?
So Steve,
Is that where,
That's my, I mean, I think that's what I was saying as well.
and what would that other option be? I know the answer, but I want to hear.
A total rebuild, it's something that we can bring in for the.
That's not his option, by the way. No,
No, I would do it, I would do another project that would get us in some other limit. Andy brought up a good point, that 6 million is for a certain project, half the size or 25% of the size or a different program is not what 6 million is supposed to spend for, but
Well-
there's got to be another, a potential option, excuse me, that based on what we're hearing in finance may reduce the net cost of the town. And I think we should look at
And what
that.
is that option?
It's a rebuild. It's got to be something that's going to have to be smaller, I would believe, based on the numbers we received from Shawmut to rebuild that in kind right now. So I don't know all the options. Thank God I wasn't on the committee way back when.
You
I don't know
how
all the-
lucky you were.
I'm realizing it every meeting, how lucky. But I think we owe it to the town, and as Jane said, the committee's always done the right thing to say, rather than just going in with 7A and saying it's $7 million, $7.5 million, here's one option, here's the other option. Finance runs their models on what they think FEMA reimbursement is, and those are the 4 data points that the town then makes the decision on which
Can I be the
option.
devil's advocate? If time is of the essence and every month that goes by is going to raise the cost, I believe if we go in and start all over again with 2 options, it's going to so delay this project. Maybe I'm wrong, and I may be the minority. I believe we should think what we think, we understand, and we should go in with one option. Because I think we're going 2 options, they're going to sit down, half people are going to think option 1 is good, the other people, and we'll never get anywhere. We're going to be sitting here, and by the time they'll decide, and then they'll come back and say, now we add 20% for labor costs. That's why, I may be wrong,
No,
I may be on the
no,
wrong side
no,
of this
I mean,
thing.
no.
I'm only concerned, maybe if the group believes we should give them 2 choices, I'll
No,
vote for it.
what we did the last time, which I think appeased a lot of people, because there was so much noise the last time we went about, and so many people had different ideas of what should be done without data points, was we said, this is our recommendation, but we know you've heard tear it down, we know you've heard build something smaller, so we gave them the data points for the noise that was happening, but we did say, this is our recommendation. So I would think that we would use that same approach. We're recommending this, but we know the noise out there, and we know you voted for $6 million, so if you want us to stay within that, this is the program you're gonna get.
But we're a lot
So-
further down the road.
Right.
That is if that's what the committee wants to do, and I'm the chair, so but that's a reopening. In other words.
No, I say we want 7A,
I
we're
mean,
just
you guys
giving
are
the
going to go back
example.
for additional funding. If time is at the, not, time is critical.
Yeah, it seems to be.
Well, it is critical. I mean, if we want to, if it is critical, then we should go back with one project or another, not reopen with alternatives.
I
And
agree.
just justify
I think-
why
I
the
think- I
$6
think we should go
million
ahead
number
with
they approved just won't work. We have experts who'll say, you know what I mean? That there was we thought we could build it. We're going to give you 7A, which what you wanted. However, the marketplace has said 7A is going to cost, in today's environment, today's timeframe, $7 million.
I'm going to hold just a minute, and I'll get to you, Ian. I am. Let's take a break and listen to Shawmut, because they had a couple of agenda items here. One was make sure we knew what we were talking about with 7A. The other was 7, or whatever we want to call it, without the locker. So if you could, just take us a little further through the scenario where we would salvage 7A. What would it require, and what is that number going to be? I mean, there's enough on paper right now, as far as without any increases for extended time. That project, what is the number for that project? I mean, I'll go look for it, but I'd rather hear it from you.
No, I mean, and we've talked about this, I think, earlier. We're looking at a number we think, or we feel probably close to $7 million. Option 7A, in our opinion, is viable because, like, as you had mentioned earlier, it's already been tested in the market. We already have all the bids in for the project. All we need to do is reconfirm with the subcontractors and let them know what the revised schedule would be, the time frame, for them to, if they have to do any repricing, to put that together for us, and we can get that back to the committee. So we would have a very hard number. I think if you open up to another option where it's not tested in the market, you're going to delay the project overall because the design time alone is probably going to be another 4 months for a different scheme. And you're just going to keep
And
pushing
the
the
cost of
project
design,
further out. You're just going to be into March and April next year.
How does the market respond? We're not the only entity, the only public entity that's delayed a project. As a matter of fact, I think there are probably a lot of projects that have been delayed. How do you anticipate the trade contractors that have bid will respond to the fact that we are going to start the project not this fall, but next spring?
I think the bidders who provided numbers would like to see the project to go ahead, but they just need, they just need additional information. They have to feel comfortable in their bids. They were comfortable with their bids 2 months ago, but with everything that's been going around, I'm sure they're a little nervous about, what's going to happen and when is it going to happen. So, I mean, if we can get back to them and say, hey, we're going with this option, we're going with the bid, we need you to reconfirm your numbers, this is the new schedule. If there is a change in price, let us know. We can come back to the committee and we get the okay or the approval on
What's
it.
the time frame for that process?
2 weeks?
2 weeks, 2 weeks to confirm?
Yeah, we'd have to go out and talk to roughly 20 subcontractors, and we'd have to interview the second low bidder in the general trades package, but we could probably get that done in 2 weeks.
Did you interview all the trade contractors?
Yes. We've reviewed.
And are you satisfied with the capability and quality of what you're dealing with?
Yes.
So they were good trade contractors?
Yes.
Experienced?
Yep.
Qualified?
Yes.
Twig, is there any problem from the purchasing department about sending the construction manager out to ask for additional time and a project delay and start, essentially what it is?
There isn't. We have bid the project.
Sit down.
We have bid this, and in the case of 4 of the trade packages, we've bid it twice. I don't expect that if we bid it a third time or a second time for some of the trades, that we'd get a better result or a different result. And from the perspective of the town in meeting the bidding requirements, I don't see any reason why we could not use the bids that we presently have, if the bidders are willing to extend them beyond the 90 days.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yeah, I think you'll have to go up to the microphone.
That microphone right there?
Yeah.
It's a question for me.
Yes, what would it take to lock them in before the 90 days has expired, a letter of intent? I mean, is there any way you could pull the trigger and at least on some of the trade packages?
We've done letters of intent before. We've been very careful to phrase them so that while it is a letter of intent, we are not contracting in that letter. So the letter would say that provided we reach a GMP with the construction manager, we expect to execute the bid package and move forward with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it would be contingent on, sometimes it's contingent on funding approval, sometimes it's contingent on something like
Yeah, a
this.
real letter of intent has to have all the elements of a contract.
Yeah.
So, if I may, Twig, so if Schwamick goes back and tries to confirm, is past the 90 days, and someone they at that point in time can bow out, right, as a bidder. They're not, after the 90-day window, they don't have to remain as a bidder on this project, correct? I can withdraw my bid, my bid is expired.
Technically, that is correct, yes.
So the reason I asked that question is because I appreciate the 2 weeks, but if someone backs out, now we're to the next lowest bidder, which may, in certain packages, besides just the general trades, is another big swing in our project cost.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
They're not bound past the 90 days.
so.
Contractually, they're not.
Yeah.
We can't make somebody at that point.
And
It's a potential risk is the reason I bring that up.
Yes.
True, and the question really before the House is, the committee would ask the construction manager to provide a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price, on a March 1st start. I'm just picking a number. And then you'd have to do whatever you have to do to come back to us and say, here's your GMP, here's your new schedule, this is what we're going to do. That's the way it works in the real world. I don't know what's happening here, but, or what has happened.
We're getting into the real.
Bizarro world.
Yeah.
Coming into orbit.
And this is apropos of an understanding by the committee whether they're going to go with 7A or whether we're going to go with 7 or what we're going to do here. So what's left of the agenda is we have the 2 projects here. We've heard about the latest communications regarding FEMA. We have not received an updated presentation regarding 7A, but I think we've had enough of a discussion about 7A. The 7, just to round out the entire discussion, 7 was the project without the lockers, right?
That's correct.
And you've provided a number for that, an estimate. And I understand that what you said was at the last meeting that the estimate benefited from the market numbers for 7A. In other words, you knew more about, in building up 7, you had better numbers, or you, help me out.
We were using the numbers that were received from the bid information to supplement that. That's correct.
So is it safe to assume that your estimate for 7
has a higher level of accuracy?
Okay. And the estimate for 7, has that changed during the last 3 weeks? Between the last meeting and this meeting?
We would have to reevaluate some of the soft costs. There's been meetings regarding the soft costs. That would be the only change that I could.
And help me out, that number was? You should be finding it faster than I am.
So, I believe the soft cost right now is roughly about 819,000.
Yeah, it went down a little from the 827 I sent you during the week.
So just, you're the ones who have the numbers. We're the ones who need them. What is 7, what is your number, what is your planning estimate, conceptual estimate, whatever you're calling it, for 7, the project without the lockers and with the added back restroom?
Thank you. Who needs to use a bigger font?
Okay, so just very briefly take it. So what we're really looking for is the number and your level of confidence. We're calling this Scheme 4.
Scheme 4, that's correct.
Smaller east wing without lockers, just bathrooms.
That's correct.
So what we were saying was bathrooms, showers, and changing area, and reuse of the existing day lockers?
That's correct.
That's correct. What's that mean? That means, yes, you agree with what I just said?
Yes.
Okay. So that number, help me out here.
So what was happening, because of the increases in contingencies and things like that, we're comparing what we presented to you on September 3rd. And from the comments of that meeting, there was an addition of contingencies and things like that, and then also some additions of additional soft costs based on meetings with the town folks as well. So what was ended up happening was we were starting to exceed what we had forecasted on September 3rd. So we've had some discussions amongst ourselves and with you as well that to start managing that cost to be equivalent to the design contingency, because you've got a 5% design contingency, a 5% owner's contingency, and a 5% construction contingency, along with everything else included in there. So to help balance out and to better manage our results on bid day, we have also, if you look at the second page, what we're doing is we've kind of stepped back looking at saying that the base bid of the number is build like same again, but have add alternates, bringing it back up to your design that you have now that's equivalent to the amount, or roughly the amount of design contingency that we have. So that on bid day, you've got add alternates, which work better in the marketplace than deduct alternates. You get a truer number from the subcontractors. So your base design would be very similar to what you have now, with some additions that are required from the town as far as code requirements and things like that. But with some of the enhanced items that came up through the development of the design. So by managing your bid day results, you've got add alternates that are equivalent to your design contingency dollar amount. That'll help us manage the end result, because you've got 15% in contingencies at this point versus the 8% we had originally.
15% contingencies in this, not in option 7A, correct?
In 7A, you have roughly about 10% contingencies, because you've got a 5% owner's contingency and a 5% construction. You don't need a design contingency.
So if just for the benefit of the committee, if we wanted to really do a true apples to apples comparison, at 10% each, what would be the number for option 7 today versus what it was on September 3rd?
More happened than just the
Another
option.
250,000.
Right, it's equivalent, yeah, we came up about, roughly about $200,000.
Up.
Right. And that's what we were looking, we had a negative of 149,000. We've tried to bring the design down and then manage it with the add alternates plus design contingency to give us plenty of options to manage our results and to give you these choices at the end. And you would stagger that out when, let's say that you're 50% of the construction of it and you haven't used your construction contingency, you can even add more back into it. That would help you with your landscaping and things of that nature.
So, for $1 million, the difference between these two proposals is $1 million. So $1 million, you get the locker wing back, and you get a higher reimbursement rate. Because it's going to be considered a replacement, or this is going to be considered either a modified or a repair project.
And you get back what the town had asked for since the building of Penfield.
Right.
It's just not accurate.
Okay. Are there any questions about this particular estimate and this particular proposal? I mean, we've been through this one before, and the purpose of this exercise is to stick with the agenda, number one, and number two, to give the committee an opportunity to look at an alternate project. One thing, and maybe a little bit out of order, but Ken, we haven't heard from you, and you've been listening to this discussion about the pulling together a GMP on the bid project. Is there anything that you would add from your standpoint as the senior person? Is it doable and
Yes, it's definitely doable, and we already have reached out to all the trades already and have a good firm handle on most of the trades, so just calling back and getting the confirmation of making that date longer than 90 days and calling a second bidder for the general trades. In terms of schedule, we'd like to get the job started as soon as we can as well. I think that's one option to get this thing moving and bring bringing the building back to the town of Fairfield. So yes, we do definitely think that that option is definitely doable and feasible.
If the committee had to go before, apparently from what I've been told, nothing happens in November around here. I can't understand why, but it doesn't, in an election year. So it looks like December. And I think by the time we get to the approval agencies in December, we'll have, the rails will be greased. Hopefully not for us to go out of town on. Would you then, what would be your start date? I mean, we're almost getting to a point where you have to start the project to deliver it.
Right.
So your start date would be March, February?
March, but if we could maybe start earlier and get things set up and maybe do the demo of the locker room and get certain things done earlier if it's not a bad winter. I mean, the goal is to have the building turned over and landscape, right? So you don't want to be landscaping the building in December of next year because you want everything to grow. So you want to hit that landscaping date of September, October, which is a prime season for landscaping, which means that you probably would want to start around January, February, the project. So if we can start something in January, February, demo, set up, and get going on something, and if it is a mild winter, start moving the pavilion to the parking lot. We would like to do that. We would like to get this job, team's ready to go and get out there, but we don't want to increase the risk of the job, so we'll have to see how it goes in the winter, but that is one option to start a little bit early.
What would you ask the trade contractors, what kind of an extension do you think you're going to be asking for? I know it's unfair because you haven't had a chance to think about it, but an additional 90 days?
So if we're going to go for December approval, then it would be another 60, right? So to be safe, I'd say another 90 on top.
Is there any, what concerns you the most about this project?
Probably unforeseen conditions, and making sure that, we're going to go back one more time for funding and to make sure that, we're all comfortable with the money that we have in our budget and going back one more time and that would be it. So just making sure that we all check the numbers, check the soft costs, make sure we're all comfortable with it and go in one number that we're all comfortable with.
Do you think it would be advisable for the committee to re-engage the forensic engineer for another review?
It's been sitting there for a year. It wouldn't hurt for probably the small cost of it. I think last time was maybe only $3,000 or so.
It's closer to $7,500.
Oh, was it $7,500? It probably wouldn't hurt.
But you're still comfortable with the building?
Yes. Okay. Part of that too, Jim, is how long will it sit? Will it sit until March or will it sit until January? So having a better feel about when it's going to start can help, clean that up a little bit. But it wouldn't hurt, but to me, it's not needed.
Okay. Any questions of our CM at the moment?
No.
Whatever happened to Ellery?
He's got
He's what?
restroom break.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any, Kevin, we haven't heard from you as far as this discussion. Do you have anything you would like to add?
From our standpoint, we're still behind option 7A, the bid project that's already been, tested by the market. It does give the town back all the function of the existing building. It's certainly more cost-effective than a brand-new facility that includes all of that same function. But we'll follow whatever direction the committee wants to take. We're just kind of waiting for our marching orders.
As you listen to this committee debate this issue and go all over the place, is there any additional concerns or warnings or maybes or what-ifs that you have in your mind? Because you've been with it from the start.
In terms of being able to reuse...
7A, risks to the
Yeah.
point of contingency and so forth. You had a comment?
No.
Okay.
I think at this point on option 7A, the base project, we have 10% in contingency split on the owner's side and the construction manager's side. I think that should be sufficient for a project
On a
of this
bid
nature.
project?
Yes.
Not on a pre-bid, not prior to bid, but on a bid project?
Yeah, I do think that, I think you have to focus on what the committee's doing right now tonight. But once that's passed, if we're still looking at option 7A, we should reconvene and go down the list of all the adds and deducts and make sure everybody understands what's in the project and what's not in the project.
Right.
Don't do that tonight, please.
No,
Wait
but-
till the dust is settled.
Yeah, but keep in mind that my question of the whole group, the team, and that is, if we are at 6.6 and we add 3 on top of that, which were the alternate adds, do we come back to a project that you designed and we approved? That's my question. And
My understanding is yes.
Yes, that's, okay.
You guys, that's your understanding too, right?
Okay. Could you yell at Ellery? Is he, unless he's asleep out there, and then if he is, just wake him up? Huh?
Or maybe in the restroom.
Trying to figure out how to resign.
So, we're at a crossroad, and this is a committee, so we're going to have to all, I wanted to bring you back in because we got an important,
Do we need to hear from Jerry?
Question?
yes.
Would it be possible to work a parallel path with Shawmut vetting the current bidders while the committee perhaps tried to fast track some of the approval process in October?
You might, I'd have to go to the
Rather than
first,
wait until December.
I'd have to go to the first selectman on
Risk
that.
losing some
Yeah,
votes with that.
yeah.
That might.
I think you're still going to have to, you're still going to have to get the feel for an extension, because what'll happen is, you could get approval, but it could be,
How do you fast track it anyways without a final number?
Well, I think there's probably some ways. Thank you.
you could, you're close to the final number right now. I mean, if it were me, I'd be able to
least
pull
get
the
on the
final
schedule.
number.
I think that Shawmut is probably pretty close to a final number, and perhaps massage it a bit or make some assumptions based on what they hear when they, get a read on contractors, as if they're willing to extend or not, and perhaps put a fudge factor in that number on the, if it's not used, it doesn't get used, but it may be helpful to have it.
Okay, Ken?
So we can deliver a GMP in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks from tonight, you can have a GMP to the building committee and take that on to approval.
But that gets us, I'll, if the committee wishes, if depending on where the committee is tonight, we might be able to do that, but I'm not hopeful that he'll get funding approval in 2 or 3 weeks.
Because it would have a caveat that the schedule starts in December 1st or whatever it would be, right? The GMP
I mean,
would be a condition.
we can still ask for maybe, 30 days longer and not 90, and have a GMP delivered in 2 weeks, ask for 30 more days as part of the final number. And then the building committee goes to the town proposal in October, maybe finish up in November, and then we're out there.
All right, we can think about that, but I still think you're going to end up, we'll conclude the meeting with direction, but I think you're still going to end up with a 60 to 90-day extension. You're not going to, by the time all this settles out, if in fact it does, and if it is in fact 7A, you got a late winter, spring start. I mean, so you're going to have to negotiate that even.
No, it's audio only.
You're either negotiating a bid extension, you're negotiating a new start date. I mean, Jerry, you've been very patient back there, listening as usual. Anything from Parks and Rec perspective here?
No, and the chairman was just here.
Jerry?
Jerry knows how to enunciate.
We should put a microphone in the
Yes, the
back.
chairman was
Because
just
it
here.
indeed, it's your building we're doing here.
Right, and we are pleased that we hope that you're going to move forward with 7A, potentially asking for more funding, from what we heard this evening, because that was what the Park and Rec Commission, in a program standpoint, wanted, and I think that's why we changed the whole thing back in February. So we look forward to, working with you and moving forward.
Good, thank you. Just out of curiosity, is the $1 million spread? Well, I'm not going to ask.
Please don't get away.
Is that where I was going?
You want to know the answer?
No.
Fine.
Okay, members of the committee, we've been through our agenda. We're down to the last agenda item, which if we are to honor, respect it. And then, yeah, right, adjournment. If we respect the agenda, we now are in a situation where we should decide what we should be doing. And again, we ended up over the last meeting, the 3 special meetings, and this meeting, considering 2 different projects. The one that's received the most back and forth tonight was 7A. We did hear about what 7 looks like. Thank you for the efforts there. Updating those numbers, which is a $6 million project, out of coincidence. So I think we've got to move forward. It's 20 after 8. I'd certainly entertain a motion regarding proceeding with one project or another. Yes.
It would seem to me if I'm somebody sitting in, whoever the body is approved this thing, I would ask one fundamental question. You came to us with 7A, and you asked for $6 million. You have not put a shovel in the ground, and you need another $1 million.
Right.
Just explain to us in simple terms what happened between the time we approved it to today that requires $1 million. I think if we can make a compelling argument, we can move forward. Everyone wants 7A, Parks wants it, the committee wants it. I think the only issue is we have to be able to demonstrate that we did a competent job when we came up with the $6 million number, and that things were unforeseen without a shovel in the ground. I think if we can make that argument, I think we'll get approval.
Well, the professionals who we've engaged to make that argument are sitting right there in the second row. And so how comfortable are you with supporting that, if that were to come, if that were a point of discussion, how comfortable you are backing up the difference between the 2 numbers?
I think Ken.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not a problem for us to go up there with you folks to the committees and defend that, you know, and it's based on the market and the soft costs, and it's pretty easy to explain.
It's going to have to be crystal clear.
Yeah.
You can practice with us.
Okay.
It may be softened a little bit by the net cost of the town calculations, which I'm sure are going to come up. I keep on trying to explain that to Mr. Mayor, but I think they're going to come up.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. We have two projects on the table. We have one main project on the table, and we have an alternate, which is 7. So I know, I've heard, is Rich still there?
Rich, you're here, just audio only, right?
Yeah, I see you. I don't think you guys can see me, but I see
We can
you
just
in
see
your
a
area.
bottle.
I'm sticking with 7A, and
He's just going for it.
I think that's the way to go.
Okay, but...
And no options.
Do we need a move?
Presented as 7A.
Okay.
Do we need a movement to
Yeah, you
make
do.
a vote?
There should be a motion. We should vote on this and move it forward.
I'll make a
We've been-
motion.
We've been,
I'll make a motion that we move forward with 7A,
and request additional funding.
and we approach the town bodies for additional funding based upon what we heard tonight. And only one option.
And would you consider an addition or an amendment that would direct the construction manager to firm up the numbers for 7A? Because we can't go very far
Right.
without
Right.
firm numbers for 7A.
Right, and that's the
if
construction.
If
and
that's the motion.
And that's the construction managers to sharpen the numbers on 7A, yes.
Confirm them all, yeah, for the point of the GMP. Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second it. Rich has got it.
Okay.
Alan, can you read it? Can you read that motion back, what you got?
Do you want me to do it?
Okay.
We wanna do
Go
it?
forward with 7A and approach the town bodies for additional funding and ask the construction manager to sharpen the numbers.
No, I don't think it's...
Validate.
I think it's...
Okay, to
You said no
validate.
options.
To
Confirm.
validate?
Confirm or validate, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, it's not
For a
my
GMP.
motion, but I think it's not just validate the new numbers, but try to explain why, without the project moving forward, it increased by $1 million. I think
Okay, so
that's
we
what
can
it's
just add
what it
it.
is.
Wait.
No?
We can say including explanation.
I don't think that belongs in a motion. I think that goes to, once we move forward, that's that's the discussion, but I don't think you can,
There's going to be two things. There's going to be this, which instructs, to the sense of the body, you know, the body says, we're moving forward with 7A, gives instruction to Shawmut.
Right.
Then we're moving forward. Then there's going to be a second motion, 2 weeks, a month, where we say, this is our motion to request a certain amount of additional or new bond funding,
Right.
correct?
But it's implied, it's implicit in this motion that you're going to have to ask for more money.
Right.
Your point. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
$7
I
million
get it.
project, we just
I
heard
don't
about
think
it.
the issue is we're gonna ask for more money. I think people are gonna ask us, why do you need more money? I mean,
And
I could be wrong,
Well,
maybe the minority.
I think
If
you're-
people don't
no, I
believe,
think you're right.
That's where we have to do, we have
Yeah.
to sit down and
But that's a
justify.
caveat or a
I
parenthetic
think that's
comment.
right, but I don't think that's, should be
Doesn't
part of
matter.
the motion, that's going to be part of the discussion.
Okay,
I'll
so,
defer to you.
I mean, we may have 50 questions,
So we
not
have a
just that
motion.
one.
yeah, we have a motion that's been made and seconded, now entertaining discussion.
Are we asking Shawmut to develop a GMP? Or are we saying, well, let's confirm the numbers, mate? What do they come back with, based on this motion? At some point in time, we've got to give them, I personally believe, we've got to give Shawmut direction, say, GMP, they can caveat what they would need to do so, because then we're going to ask for GMP after they've confirmed numbers, and that number may change, so,
Let's get a GMP.
right?
You said you could have it in 2 weeks, correct? With
I
caveat.
just want to make sure the motion's clear, you know.
Yeah, would you,
If we give them direction, we have to also, we have to give them direction
I
on
think you ought to be
on
specific.
a start date assumption for the GMP.
I think maybe your idea.
We give you a
and
GMP and a start date.
I think Andrew's idea of two different motions is appropriate. I think we're trying to put too much
Well, if
into this
you're-
one
if-
motion.
All right. We have a motion made and seconded to proceed with option, or project 7A.
Right,
Is that what your motion is?
right.
Right.
Our motion's been made and seconded to proceed with project 7A,
Right.
which is including the lockers. Right?
Right.
Is there any discussion on that?
I think your valid point. The question is, though, that, is this motion implicit that when we go to the body, that we have a number that we can deliver on? I think that's your point.
That'll be
If
the
we don't have a
sec-
number we deliver on, they say yes, 7 million, then we come back and say,
Bifurcated the motion. I think we're
That'll be the second motion.
Yeah.
I just want one last shot. And I'm actually putting it out to the committee, because I don't know really where my opinion lies, actually. I understand everyone wants to do one option. I'm not asking to do redesigns and other options. We, right now, have a price of a different project.
Right.
Rough, it's not rough order magnitude, but it's an estimate. And you guys have been in front of the town bodies before, most of you. If they say, no, we don't want to spend any more money on this project, what's my next alternative? I'll use that thing, not design. What's the committee going to say to the town body? Well, there is none, we're canceling the project if we don't get the $1 million? I would expect that question would be,
Yeah, you'd have to go back
So-
and start all over again.
So how Rob explained it to me, because we had this exact same discussion when we decided to present, here are the other options we looked at, but here's what we're recommending. Because it was very clear that we had to go in with one recommendation, they had to vote on that. And how he explained it to me was that they could say, we don't want this option, but then we could ask them at that meeting for direction. So an RTM member could stand up and say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and then the Board of Selectmen would need to then, agree to that. So we had this exact same discussion when we presented all the other options. What if they say no? And that was how it was explained to me. Is that how you guys remember? That we could ask the RTM for direction, they could stand up and tell us, and the Board of Selectmen would then have to say what they wanted us to do.
I just am thinking that the RTA may sit there and say, well, we really don't want to authorize an extra $1 million, so what's my next alternative?
Right.
Not designs.
Right.
Well,
Alternative
that
is-
would be part of the discussion. They wouldn't be able to necessarily do that. They would have to be turning us down with the knowledge of what their next step.
That's why,
What's-
that's why I keep bringing up, when I apologize for
Why
using the term option, because I understand what
I
that
get it.
means for this committee. Right now, I think the motion, at least going forward with 7A, is now putting blinders on everything else. And we're going to go to they don't have all the information by which to make an educated.
Well, we've been through that. We've been through, when we originally
With the numbers?
presented.
With the numbers, though?
We had
Had numbers.
options and the numbers. I don't think anybody in this town, approving bodies or not, has the stomach to go through this whole process again. If you're suggesting that the committee provide 2 different alternates for this project?
What I'm suggesting is that, I'm just wondering what the response.
I don't have any idea, and I don't think we should be.
What would our response be if in fact they say we're not spending another penny on this project?
I don't know. I'd like to wait till that happens.
Right, so how it was
Okay,
explained to me
that's fair.
was that we were allowed to stand up then and say, we need direction from the RTM, and they could let us know. I think we put a lot in the presentation when we did the first time with the options, so when we present, if we all agree to 7A, part of it can be, we can have things in our back pocket. If they start challenging and have you looked at this and have you looked at that, that's when we can show them, we have looked at these 42 things, if that's the direction they want to
This
go.
is a full-blown presentation of multiple alternates, multiple projects with different values, different scopes.
Right.
Anyway, is there any discussion as far as the motion is concerned?
I do want to discuss confirm the number versus the GMP.
But that's not in the motion.
Oh, that's a second motion. Is that second motion tonight, or is that a tomorrow?
It's
next?
tomorrow.
Tomorrow, is that what you said, tomorrow?
We won't be here tomorrow. That said,
Okay.
I'm going to move the motion's been made and seconded. I'm going to request a vote. All in favor of the motion that's made and seconded. Anybody want to reread? It's basically.
I'd like to reread. I think it's been abbreviated significantly.
Yeah.
So, go forward with 7A and approach the town bodies for additional funding and ask the construction manager to validate numbers for GMP.
Close enough.
Is that good?
I thought we were doing a second motion.
Well, they're combined now, or whatever.
She combined,
Is it all right with you, the maker and the seconder?
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
Good?
Yep.
Yeah,
So have it on my time.
that's fine.
No, what else is
I
there?
think it's the right thing to do, so I'm happy with
But
it.
the only thing that wasn't in there is then we have another motion. We have to instruct what parameters for Shawmut to use as the assumptions for the GMP, especially on the start date. Is that going to be another motion?
But
If the
or
first one
instru-
succeeds.
or just simply instructions outside of the motion. I think the motion is short and simple enough. Is everybody comfortable with it?
I moved the question,
Question's been moved.
What does
all-
that mean?
cut off discussion,
Rich?
Mr. Roberts over there.
because we're all getting babbly about it, it's late in the day.
You're with us, Rich? You understand the motion?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I still second it as is.
All right. So it's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
You have to raise your hand.
Opposed?
He doesn't have to raise his hand.
All opposed?
I don't like the direction.
All right, so it's, the motion carried. So,
Steve, was it
Yeah.
abstention?
Did you abstain or did you vote no?
I voted no.
Okay, so Ian and Steve voted no.
okay, so the motion was made and carried and to proceed with option 7A and to request additional funding.
Can I ask a question?
And I can
Could I
explain.
ask the 2 individuals who voted against it,
Oh, we know
what
I
would the
voted
option
against
have to have said that we could have a unanimity when we go back to the bodies? I'm not putting you on the spot, but I'd be just curious.
I'd be
what-
happy to answer. I don't mind the 7A option. I think that this committee owes it to the town body to not go up there with one answer and say, this is what it's going to be, make a decision, yes or no. I
I've
don't
been
like-
there, Steve. All I can tell you is, and you can speak to the people that put together and made the presentation. We've been there. We have been there. And we were there for most of December, all of January, and most of February, going through just that very thing.
Okay.
But that, I don't want to take away from that question because it's a good one.
It's
No, I don't-
valid, but I think we.
So I understand, sorry, Andrew.
No, go ahead.
I understand I don't have the history here. I still think in any public forum or business forum, it's almost like you have to choose this or something, or you have to choose this, or what is the or?
Well,
That's where I don't
It doesn't
feel
discount the
comfortable.
fact that we do have the information of other options in our knowledge bank. Like Jim, we have option 7, our original option,
Right. So,
sort of midway between the estimation and a bid.
think
I'm
it's-
not against 7A, that was that's not the reason why.
No, I think it's a presentation question, and I think it's very valid. Like, how do we present it? And I think it's valid to say we present 7A, but we're prepared to discuss if questions are asked, the
And
other
I think
options
we
that we
probably
looked
instruct
at.
Bob Mayer to say, you at least, when we talking about net costs for things,
Mhm.
you at least have to have a relative net cost impact of, if the committee, if RTM says, you have 6 million, go back to where you're coming from and, you know, build a project for 6 million. We have a project that we can build for 6 million.
Well,
Bob
that's
has
the
to
point.
have,
But they have to approve it.
right, Bob has to have an idea, at least, to say, these are the general impacts of
Well,
restricting it.
It does, if you're saying that, that the committee has, and we have it on our agenda, and we just have a number for it, 7, which is the $6 million project, which meets the funding criteria, and is not the $7 million project.
And it gets
You-
run
you-
through
you
the
could-
model so that Bob can look at net costs
You
of the
could
town.
certainly.
I think all those are inputs.
You could certainly propose that. As far as asking, we have all the information, numbers aren't as hard as they are from public bidding, but you could certainly ask the chief financial fiscal officer to run the same models on 7 as 7A.
I think that's what I'm
So-
been
so
talking
it's-
about all night,
so-
and everyone says, no, we're not going up with options, and I think we're mincing the terms, because I think they need to understand, because the
data.
FEMA discussion, it's not in our,
No,
is
I
going to
understand.
come up. He runs a model on this FEMA, and there's a net cost to the town, maybe that's all they need to hear, good, it's the program we wanted, it's net cost to town still within the window, good, move on. Or if they say, well, no, we don't want to, what do you guys recommend as next steps then? As long as we are in agreement on what our next steps would be as a committee to recommend to the RTM,
No,
whether it's an
I-
option or otherwise, that's all.
I think we should have a motion then, because that is right, that we, as a committee, move that Bob has to be able to discuss the two 7A and then the $6 million
I have no problem
project.
with that.
Okay.
So then, to your point, because I get it, because that's why we presented all those options before, we wanted them to have all the data points.
And that's the $6 million project.
And that's the
That's the
$6
one
million
that goes
project.
within our funding requirements.
The reason
But
I
it doesn't-
challenge you is, I think when they hear that there was two people, and this is public now, if they're censored, they're gonna say, well, obviously, the committee there wasn't an agreement in the committee that 7A was the one. I mean, that's why it would seem to you when you vote no, and you certainly have the right to vote no, my assumption was that you didn't believe 7A was what the recommendation from this committee. And that's why by voting no, implicit in that 7A is not what the committee should be recommending out. But what I hear from you is, it's not
That's
that
not that at all.
7A, that you needed an alter. I'm just curious, I mean, I'm
No,
not to defend your position.
hopefully I explained it. It's not that I don't like 7A at all. I think that's the way to go. I just, when we were talking about, I'm a proponent of going with a couple of data points
Be allowed to change
so
the
that
motion?
you're providing the town bodies with the
Does it
information
say,
so they
and
can make an
redirect the
informed
chief
decision.
fiscal officer
By
to
going up and
present
saying, I need $1
to
million
be
more
able
for
to
the project that you guys
discuss
voted on, what's their other alternative?
To your point,
Chair.
But actually, indirectly.
Can't direct them.
Well, certainly,
Okay, Andy, you want to,
Excuse me?
you don't have to defend your
Isn't the
million
motion
dollar
already
vote,
passed?
but-
I mean,
the
this
motion,
No,
the
but-
motion's already passed, but the committee can certainly,
I'm just curious to see what the motion would have to have been that Ian would feel comfortable to. If you don't want to answer it, you don't have to answer it.
I'd be happy to
Has
answer
never
it.
voted.
Unfortunately, it's the same thing that my fellow committee members have heard. I think that option 7A was a politically motivated change to what this committee had originally recommended, which was option 7. And that this committee has fallen prey to political undercurrents. And with all due respect to my fellow committee members, anytime they say, 7A is what the town wants, that's just not an accurate statement. There were several surveys that were done in writing. There were several surveys that were done in email. There were several surveys that were done online. And a margin of 3 to 1 in each one of those surveys by the town residents, for those people who responded, came back, and I've got copies of them all if anyone would like to see them. Margin of 3 to 1 came back and said they wanted a smaller, less expensive pavilion. It then became a political football, and it was not a unanimous vote at all by the RTM. In fact, it involved quite a bit of discussion, and I am not in favor of 7A. I originally voted for 7 way back when, which even then I thought was a larger project than what we needed, but back then we were under the impression, we meaning this committee, were under the impression that the cost of option 7 was going to be approximately $2.5 million, which would have been our insurance reimbursement plus our grant money. It then went from $2.5 million up to $5 million and then $6 million. And I, with all due respect to the chief fiscal officer and his comment, which I partially agree with about it's really about what the net cost to the town is. I think the political undercurrents have swayed this to the extent that we're really not thinking about this from a business perspective. And I would say that every town that pays taxes and feels that they should get as much as they can from FEMA or any other governing body, because, you know, if it's out there, we should take it, is one of the reasons why we all pay taxes and why our taxes on a national level keep going up every year. So we're paying, we as Fairfielders are paying more taxes because people from Katrina abused the system and got more money than they needed. That's well documented. There are people in Katrina who got millions of dollars that weren't entitled to it. And that's one of the reasons why FEMA has started to clamp down as much as they have, which is one of the other concerns that I have about FEMA reimbursement for our program. So, long-winded story. I apologize for that, but I think spending even $6 million was out of line. And I think spending $7 million is $1 million more than out of line.
Okay, I think it's a persuasive point you're making, and that you've made, Steve, and if we entertain a motion to put for, run 6 because of the documentation we have, it would be different if we had to go out and do a design, go out and do an estimate and so forth. We have the appropriate documentation. So the question would be, before us, we have a motion passed, it's 7A. Do you want to do the same modeling, request the same modeling, so that when we do go forward, we do have the 2 projects, one that we worked on so hard to bring in on budget of $6 million, and the other that's a $7 million project, which includes the lockers. I have no problem with that.
I absolutely agree, it's the right way to go.
That was the main reason for my objection to the motion.
Do you want to make a motion?
I think, well, yeah, I'll try to do a motion. So my motion, our motion would be is that we firm up as well, which is the old option 7, which in front of us is scheme 4.
Right.
And have that as the alternative for presentation, data point, 1, and 2, that this also is provided to the chief fiscal officer to run his FEMA modeling with,
Okay.
in comparison to 7A.
And this is the project that meets the funding that we were given.
Well, that
Yes.
doesn't mean it.
Yeah.
It meets the funding,
But
does it
not
meet the intent
design.
of the program as the bond?
But it
Meets the funding,
it's
correct.
right.
She's lost.
I'm lost, yeah.
No, but we've got it.
Oh, I didn't write it down,
You didn't?
sorry.
Then
She
make sure
doesn't have it.
No, I wrote down what you guys were
I want
talking
to make a
about.
motion that we,
Take my notes. I
make a
just
motion
send out
that
emails.
That we continue with scheme 4.
continues the confirm the pricing for scheme 4. And that also gets, that's provided to the chief fiscal officer to run the FEMA modeling off of this project as well.
Would you have a problem if the motion said we have available, if the RTM wanted an alternative to 7A, and then go on what you say? In other words, the
That's
issue
not-
becomes...
that's not a
if the-
motion.
the-
They
Motion's
want this to
direction.
be in our
Vote on
back
it.
pocket.
Separated. Just, it's good.
Right,
It-
and the
it-
RTM
it
wouldn't be
works.
able to say, wouldn't be able to vote on it anyway. They could only vote on 7A.
Fair enough?
So we have a motion and seconded, made and seconded, and it really involves proceeding with a dual track with option 7, which is the no lockers option, which is $6 million. And
I know how the outcome's going to go.
so that was made. Any questions about that motion? Was there a seconder?
Oh, I'll second it.
Yeah.
I think it's a valid motion.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fine.
You all set?
Yeah, I'm going to vote for it, so if I vote no, Dave is going
Well,
to
just
ask me
hold your
why
hand.
I'm voting no.
Well,
We're going to be starting all over again, then there'll be a third motion.
If there's a problem, just raise his hand for
I
him.
will. I had a vote no, so it's okay, we got this covered.
Any discussion regarding the motion before the vote? Hearing no discussion, I'll call a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Aye?
Aye.
Against? Unanimous. Aye?
Are you,
Yes.
One
Rich is against.
Okay, one against, the balance in favor?
Who's against?
Rich.
Rich.
it's usually
Max
aye, and I
Headroom.
know, we
Okay,
don't know what to
Dave-
do.
David's going to want to ask you why you're voting no.
Would you like me to tell you why I voted for it?
Okay.
Twig would like to, oh, I thought you
No,
wanted to
we're
make a
going down our
motion.
agenda. We've got another hour and a half.
We chased all the public out. I don't know if anybody's.
Okay.
Something with his unanimity.
Item 12, review and approve DeStefano and Chamberlain invoices number 5116 and 5182. Rob is not here, Rich is here. Have you had an opportunity to review those invoices for our committee, subcommittee on invoices?
I didn't get any invoices. No?
They're back from July.
They're back from
Okay.
July, she said.
Would the committee approve the delegation of the approval process between meetings to our subcommittee, Rich and Rob
Can you
Bolito?
inform us of what the quantities of those invoices were?
Yes.
Or maybe we'll just jump the gun and dismiss our subcommittee?
Yeah. I'm not surprised if they're not in front of folks. The first invoice is from July 27th. It's for $1,900, and it's for DeStefano and Chamberlain to respond to the RFIs during the bid process and get department sign-offs for building permit applications and so forth, to start working on the conservation and open space plans. The second invoice is dated August 31st. It is for $14,625, and it is for staff time for conceptual design and drawings for alternative project schemes, and time related to rebidding the 4 trade packages that were rebid.
Is there a motion to approve these?
I thought we had a process in place for these.
We do. We do. They're reviewed.
You know what? I'd be happy to review them if you could email them to me. And,
Want me to resend them?
I'll get
Sure.
right back.
The question is, do we, is it, it's
They
not
haven't
fair
been
to
paid.
wait.
Do we authorize them
If
between?
If you can, yeah. if-
Authorize and pending review of the subcommittee,
Yeah.
however you want to do it.
Yeah, Rob isn't here, and
Is this coming out of a line item or a contingency?
The 19th
Oh, it's a line
item.
item.
Okay.
They're
Yes.
line items, they're existing budget line items. Not the 14. The 14 was a letter from your office stating that to do redesigned concept schemes 1 through 6, or whatever they were, that it was going to be between $14,000 and $16,000, or what was the number? Do you remember?
I think I said between 10 and 15.
All right. And so, the product, I don't know whether it's going back, but the community should be aware, the product was this document.
Yeah,
set of
those
drawings.
CAD drawing options, right?
Oh, yeah.
And where the engineer went through and did these 4 different schemes.
As well as that 14 includes bid, the rebid packages, correct?
yes, it does.
Packages. So
Support
that's-
during the rebidding for those 4
That's not all,
trades.
that's not all conceptual.
Might have been some
I'd be-
meeting time as well.
I'd be guided by the
You're
committee.
right, I'm sorry, there are 2, there's a total 10 hours of committee meeting
Be
time.
guided by the committee, either send it, either approve pending review by the subcommittee, or approve them tonight, at the pleasure of the committee. Like to hear?
I'd recommend giving it to Rob and Rich, since they've been familiar with the invoicing process along the way.
All right.
Let them approve it between
With
meetings.
authority to sign off on behalf of the committee and review in the next meeting?
That's what I would be in
Sure.
favor of.
I agree with that.
All right. The motion was made and seconded that the invoices go to be reviewed. What?
Who's making the motion?
Don't know. You can pick anybody.
I'll make
At this hour- at
The
this-
chair would entertain a motion.
Yeah, the chair's-
Andy did it,
Andy
so-
did it.
I'll do
Yeah.
it.
Go ahead,
Make a
Andy.
motion to, I'm not sure how we phrase this.
So you're
I'm never good at
authorizing
making motions.
payment pending review
By
the subcommittee.
Yes.
Right, that's correct.
You're getting great.
With the,
Right
with the
now.
action of the subcommittee reviewed at the next meeting.
And I seconded it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? Moving on to the
Thank you.
next page of the agenda. Public comment.
Who's left?
Yes. Yeah, be happy to hear from you.
Judy Ewing from the First Selectman's Office, speaking for myself. First of all, you have a charge. You're the ones that makes the decision when you go to the town bodies. You then defend your decision with whatever means you want, with all your other options or one or two. Okay, that's your job, is to make the decision, not the other bodies. They can turn it down and send you back to the drawing board, but that's your decision. And the vote last time, on February 3rd, was 29 in favor and 15 opposed. That's pretty good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. And so, if you can go before the election, you got the same people, and that would be good. But the thing is that they will be happy to hear that there's money left over from that other project. So it's not, I don't think the money's a problem if they buy the 7A. I don't think the money's a problem. You got the money.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? Do we have any volunteers to join the committee? New business, old business?
No.
Hearing none?
None.
Adjournment?
Yes.
Motion made, seconded, adjourned.
Thank you.
Steve, I didn't want to put you on the spot.